Hello, guys and gals, and the Rhino from Texas. I see you creeping in there. Let me get the audio check done real quick. This is his third time visiting us in Archaix. You know, he's a great guest, and you know, I was real adamant about the Jesus of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John not being historical at all, and that it was a literary masterpiece that took over 500 years of church conventions to actually become history. But Ralph Ellis kind of changed my mind on that. Oh, I don't believe Jesus was historical according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But then again, what's being conveyed in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the sleight of hand, some of the court intrigues, the rituals. Yeah, he opened my eyes up to some of this is really interesting, especially that amphora, that trick with the water to the wine deal. That was really compelling. So I do have announcements, but I'm going to wait till tomorrow's live. We have a live tomorrow to do those because we have some mega announcements with Cypher, with my other YouTube channel, a new project being launched with my other channel. We have some big announcements. I'm going to wait till tomorrow. Without further ado, Ralph Ellis, I believe today's topic, we'll be talking about the Arthurian legends, something that I've been wanting to discuss for a while. How you doing, Ralph?
Very well. Good to be back with you, Jason. Yeah, nice to be on the show.
Man, I can tell you updated your equipment. You sound crystal clear. Yes. Yeah, you look like you're in the room with me.
My last computer was 18 years old. It was on its last legs.
Yeah, man. Sometimes we got to do it. All right, so I removed that intro. Yeah, I don't know what you have for the dating. I'm going to give you the floor. It's story. I feel like it's story time, but in my own chronological delvings into Arthur, I'm not like Michael Tessarion's really good on the Irish histories. I'm not. I just have a surface level knowledge. The early British histories, especially the Roman times, from Hadrian's Wall all the way up till the Saxon invasions. I just have a real cursory surface understanding. I believe the Arthurian time was between, was it 532 and 560 something AD? Somewhere around there. Yeah. So there's some really good material that Merlin may have just been a historical figure. And I know there's a lot of esoteric stuff about the Knights of the Round Table being the constellations of the Zodiac so I'm just interested in your take. You really do have some interesting takes, especially with the King of Edessa and the whole narrative and all the different miracles of Jesus. Yeah, it kind of opened my eyes. So I'm all ears, man. I'm all ears. I'm willing to hear whatever you got to say about King Arthur and the Knights, because my expertise is like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
You'll love this one because this takes us way back into the gospel story as well. So we've got all sorts of things to link together. Because first of all, I'm going to tell you that Arthur does not exist. And then I'm going to tell you that he does exist. Because there is a twist in the story, just as we've seen with the gospel story. We have the surface story, and then we have the underlying story.
I'm all for it.
Very, very different take on Arthurian legend. This is unique. If you've not read my books, you will never have guessed who King Arthur is. Because we have some problems with King Arthur. He doesn't exist. So as you said, 6th century, he's supposed to be 6th century fighting the Romans. There were no Romans in Britain in the 6th century. So we have an idea that something is a little bit wrong with Arthurian legend. And then we come to the authors of that era, the various chroniclers like Gildas. Gildas, he wrote the runic conquest of Britain in the 5th or 6th century. So he is of that era. And he doesn't mention King Arthur. No mention of King Arthur at all. which is odd because he was there just that time. Then we come on to the Venerable Bede, and Bede does not mention King Arthur. He's 8th century. He writes the ecclesiastical history of the English in the 8th century. No King Arthur.
You know what? These are good points. What about Albinus Alcuin? That would have been 8th century, right? 800 AD.
Which one?
Albinus Alcuin. Oh, he translated a bunch of Latin writings, but I can't remember him mentioning anything about
from Constantinople. Yes, no, they mention Horsten Henger and various other people, but there's no King Arthur. We come on to Nennius, History of Britain, 9th century, and Nennius mentions a warrior Arthur. What does he call him? A Dux Bellorum, a warlord, basically.
So Nennius was like the source. Wasn't Nennius a source for like Geoffrey of Monmouth?
Yeah. Monmouth uses the same sort of data, and he comes, well, not next, but a bit later on. But although Nennius mentions an Arthur, a warlord called Arthur, there is no court, there's no Camelot, there's no table knights, there's none of the Arthurian story within Nennius. And then same with William of Malmesbury. We're coming right on now to the 12th century, 1125. William of Malmesbury, Chronicle of the English Kings. And again, we have no King Arthur story. We have this same mention of this warrior called Arthur. Henry of Huntingdon, again, 1130. Still no King Arthur in this story. So we're right up into the 12th century. And suddenly we get Walter of Oxford and Geoffrey of Monmouth, the famous Geoffrey of Monmouth, and his History of the Kings of Britain, 1135. And suddenly we get the whole Arthurian story. So we have to wait 600 years before we get the Arthurian story. And suddenly it doesn't evolve, it's just there. It appears out of nowhere. That's very odd. That seems contrived. And then we go to William of Newburgh. And these are very good readable histories of England, very factual. You know, Henry of Huntingdon, really good history of England. William of Newburgh, History of English Affairs, 1160, very good, comprehensive history of England. And he says, so this is like 25 years after the Arthurian story suddenly bursts onto the scene. William of Newburgh says, only a person ignorant of ancient history can for a moment doubt how impertinently and impudently Monmouth falsifies the history in every respect. Whatever Geoffrey of Monmouth has written is a fiction, invented either by himself or others and promulgated either through an unchecked propensity of falsehood or a desire to please the Britons. For how would the elder historians, we're talking about Gildas and Nennius and Bede, who were ever anxious to omit nothing remarkable and even recorded trivial circumstances, pass by unnoticed so incomparable a man and such surpassing deeds as King Arthur? How could they, I repeat, by their silence, suppress Arthur, a British monarch who was superior to Alexander the Great? So this is in 1160, 25 years after Arthurian legend burst onto the scene. And William of Newburgh is ridiculing the whole idea of a King Arthur from the 6th century.
Do you think, have you checked Gibbon? Has Gibbon made any references to an author? And if he did, was his sources Geoffrey of Monmouth?
Gibbon, Decline and Fall.
Yes, Decline and Fall. You know, it's huge. You know, it's several volumes, and it covers. He
doesn't really cover it because he's mainly looking at history of the Romans, and so he doesn't.
I was just curious if Gibbon.
Yeah. It's not real history, and so normally historians will disregard anything to do with King Arthur because it's regarded as as a fantasy.
Right. So it seems like it came out at the same time the Prester John material came out.
Yeah, well, that is linked to it, and we can go into that later. Yeah, the Prester John story is linked to what was happening at this time, because there is a problem with Arthurian legend. It is not as we understand it. You know, everyone has heard of Arthurian legend. We've all seen the films. The films tend to sort of portray him as a sort of medieval knight, but of course he wasn't. He was 6th century supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that, you know, the court and the knights and the round table and everything. That story does not exist, and it did not exist in Britain. So it's not a British story, and I want to demonstrate that next. It comes from many other places.
I was about to say, you're leading us. You're literally grooming us to the fact that this is an import.
Yes, it is an import. And Thomas Malory says so himself. So Thomas Malory, who wrote Morte d'Arthur, is the only English version of King Arthur. There are no manuscripts from Britain. Even Geoffrey of Monmouth and Walter of Oxford, their manuscripts came from Normandy and Brittany in France. So Thomas Malory, in his preface, Thomas Malory is late, and it's not a very good story because he didn't understand what was going on. He didn't understand the underlying story of King Arthur. And so in his preface, he writes, "For in all places, Christian and heathen, Arthur is reputed. He is more spoken of beyond the sea, more books made of his noble acts than there are in England. And they are in Dutch, Italian, Spanish, Greek, and in French." But what he didn't have was an English version or a Welsh version of King Arthur. There was no English or Welsh King Arthur. All of the documents, and there's one of the books I've got here was quoting something like 30 versions of King Arthur, and they come from Scandinavia, from Holland, from Greece, from Italy, from Germany, of course, Wolfram von Eschenbach, from France, of course, loads of them from France, but none of them from Britain. And that's odd, because it's supposed to be, you know, an English story, but it's not. It's a European-wide story.
Well, you said Normandy, so we know that at the time the Norman Knights were importing into France everything that was of Arabic, Muslim, all the scholar, all the colleges and centers of learning and of the Islamic world were basically being filtered through. The Normans were bringing all that stuff back into northern France.
You're following the story already.
I'm gonna go ahead and shut up and let you.
No, you're following the trail already. That's exactly where we're heading. So what we want to look at next is where is, because it's still there, of course, the earliest. I was going to do a screen share and I pressed the wrong button. Where is the earliest sculpture of King Arthur? And it is very early. It's 12th century. So it's of the time of William of Malmesbury. So where might we find the earliest sculpture of King Arthur? Now there's a screen share has just come up. So that's high history, or we'll go into high history in a bit. It's a very dark story, that one. Merlin and the Grail is very good. Yeah, I'm going to talk about these in a minute. This is my book, The Grail Cipher. The Secrets of Arthurian History Revealed. There we go. Another 600-page opus. But the question we're looking at now is, where is the earliest sculpture of King Arthur? And here it is. Oh, let's zoom out a little bit on that. There we go. Here it is. So where might this be? Well, it's exactly where you would imagine it to be. It's on the door of the Cathedral of Modena in northern Italy.
Wow, those are that's Norman armor. That's Norman destriers.
You've got it. Yes, you can see the Norman armor. This is why it's known that this is a Norman story. You can see. No, let's go on this side. There we go. So we've got the chain mail and the kite shield. These are the Knights of the Round Table, and we know they're the Knights of the Round Table because all of their names are written above them.
Oh, wow.
And this is King Arthur. You can just see here Arcturus. So King Arthur is the only one that doesn't have chain mail on for some reason, and he doesn't have a helmet.
It's not expected to fight.
Yeah, he fights from the back. Not all kings did that, but many kings did, of course. And this is a scene from Arthurian legend, of course. This is the knights besieging a castle, and in the castle is Guinevere and Mordred, the son of King Arthur. So Guinevere she either elopes or gets captured by either Lancelot or Mordred, the son of King Arthur, because there is a battle between son and father. And this is the castle that she is in, the Castle Dolorous, I think it's called. So this is 12th century, let's call it something like 1150, 1160. It's a very old carving. Here is King Arthur on his horse. He's got his shield at the back there. He's got a spear, and you can just see at the top the beginning of Arcturus.
Oh,
So
wow, man.
we've got the names above each of the characters, so we know who they are.
Oh, man.
And
you better be careful. You get a knock on your door from the crown, man. Talking about be quiet about this.
And here's the castle at the top of this frieze. So here's Guinevere. She's called Wenlegui, from which we get Guinevere. There are different versions of her name, and this is one of the versions of her name, Wenlegui. And here he's called Marduk. This is the son of Arthur. And they're in this Norman castle. It's like a Norman round tower. The Normans used to make these round towers. So yes, this is Arthurian legend from the 12th century in northern Italy.
In northern Italy, wow.
And where's the second earliest sculpture of King Arthur? Well, it's here. This is from Bari in southern Italy. And this is an exact copy of what we've just seen. So we've got the Knights of the Round Table, slightly more intricately carved here.
So let me ask you. I'm asking. I'm just gonna have to make the connection here because we have so much history about the Lombards, and now I'm wondering if there's a connection between the Normans and the Lombards, because they look identical. The Lombards were long bearded, and they occupied a lot of Italy. I'm wondering now, have you found any connection between the Lombards and the Normans?
Well, Italy was Norman at this time. It was ruled by the Normans.
Yeah, the Lombards were like a few centuries earlier.
The king of southern Italy at this time was King Roger I in 1060, because the Normans took over Sicily and became the kings of Sicily. Then they became the kings of southern Italy because they were chasing out the Muslims. Remember, all of that area was under Muslim control.
Right.
So the Normans kicked them out of Italy and became the kings of Italy. And so, yes, the Italians were Normans. And then they were, of course, involved in the Crusades, going across to liberate Christian lands in the East.
Right.
And so a lot of people, Italy.
We live in Christian predominant countries, but most people, Ralph, as you know, they just don't understand Islam controlled much of Europe for centuries.
Yes. All of Spain, much of Portugal. No, they didn't get into Portugal, but Spain, all of North Africa. Remember, all of North Africa was Christian previously.
Right. All of Mauritania to Libya.
Yeah. All of modern Turkey, that was all Christian. All of Greece was taken over by Muslims at this time as well. So yes, a lot of Europe was taken over by the Muslim invasions, and so the Crusades were going to the east to liberate Christian lands, and that's why King Roger was down there in southern Italy, and they were Normans. But remember, the Normans were Vikings, so they weren't French; they were Scandinavians.
Right,
They were the
right.
Northmen, the Northmen. They came from the north. So they were all sort of like, as you say, long hair, long beards, and ginger hair as well. Because they were
the Lombards were invaders too, but they had invaded Italy for a couple of centuries and they just kind of just disappeared. But this was before the Norman invasions.
Yeah, they probably assimilated into the local populations. They often did.
Yeah, just a little curiosity for those listening. I have a dictionary of first names that gives the for the last 15 centuries, and in it I looked up Jennifer, and for those who are interested, in my dictionary of first names, it says the origin of the modern English name Jennifer comes from the Old English Guinevere.
Oh yes. It actually means Friday. So Guinevere comes from Venus, from the Latin version of Venus, and it's the name given. It's the Welsh name for Friday.
It's awesome.
So yeah, she's basically called Venus or Aphrodite, which is a good name for a queen. You know, Queen. They were all. Most of these queens were identified as incarnations of Venus, who was Aphrodite, who was Isis. So they're going back to the Egyptian Isis as being the queen of the royal families. So just quickly on this one, you can see again they're Norman knights with the Norman kite shields here, and here's the castle with Guinevere and Marduk inside. And I love this. This castle has got, I don't know if you can see it here, it's got a padlock on the front of it. So it's got a medieval padlock just sitting there on the front. Anyway, that's a famous scene from Arthurian legend. Here's another one. This is very early. Again, we're talking 12th century.
Wow.
And this says Rex Arturus, King Arthur. So where would this be? This comes from Otranto in southern Italy.
Wow, all this is from Italy.
Yeah, because it's a Norman story. It's a Crusader story. And who were the main Crusaders? The Normans from France, from Gaul, and the Normans from Italy.
Yeah.
And that's where the story came out of. It's a Crusader story. It came from the East. When you're reading things like let's go back and have a look at this. When you're reading, this is the Vulgate cycle. There are many Arthurian authors that have never read the Vulgate cycle. I mean, it's huge. It's like 5,000 pages.
Wow.
of questing and so on. Most of it is unreadable, but there are some good parts of it. And yes, when you read this, you'll find that a lot of the proper names and a lot of the notations they come across, they keep coming across these messages written on swords and boats and various other things. And all of the messages they came across that they have to interpret are all in Chaldean. And Chaldean, of course, is Hebrew. So from the very start, we understand that a lot of Arthurian legend comes out of the Near East. And it comes out of the Near East with the Crusaders who had just returned. Remember, the Crusaders went across on the First Crusade in 1096. And they did not go to Jerusalem. This was under Count Baldwin of Boulogne.
Right.
They went east. They went across the Euphrates, and the first city that they liberated from Muslim control and oppression was Edessa. That's
right. We talked about that on last video.
Yeah, we were talking about Edessa last time and how the gospel story came out of Edessa. Well, the first crusade went to Edessa. And the question is, of course, why did they go to Edessa? I think they went to Edessa because they knew the story that I was relating in my Jesus King of Edessa. So they wanted to go there to find out the origins of the gospel story.
So I have an alternate view that actually comports with what you had told me, because I did after doing my own research on the Shroud of Turin, I had done a video for my community and showed them that the pollen that's been scientifically analyzed showed that it passed through all Norman territory. All the plants were in Norman occupied territories of the 11th and 12th century that's been found on the Shroud of Turin, and it only makes sense to me that the Shroud of Turin was a Norman knight. However, we can postulate that the Shroud of Turin may have been the king of Edessa, since we're not talking about the actual. I mean, I don't want to split hairs, but a Jesus as king of Edessa is acceptable to me under all the historical evidence that you and I have discussed in the past. The Jesus of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who performed all these X-Men activities and flew up into the sky, is not the Jesus that we're talking about. But the Gospels do relate some historical narrative in there, as you've shown. So I'm on board with the Shroud of Turin actually could be the shroud of a noble king of Edessa. And that's why that pollen was found in there, because pollens from plants that are local to Turkey, around the Edessa area and Syria, all that's been found on the shroud.
Yeah, well, Edessa did have its own shroud, of course. It had the Mandylion, the very famous Mandylion, which was an image of Jesus. And that it was given by Jesus to the king of Edessa. And that's why Edessa was known as the Blessed City. And it is the forerunner of the shroud. I mean, it was supposed to be only an image of Jesus's head and face. It wasn't a full shroud, but nevertheless, it inspired anyone who would want to do, the same later.
Right.
So they had their own shroud. This is just a very quick further indication that we're talking about eastern lands rather than talking about northern France and Wales. This is early manuscripts of King Arthur. And of course, we all know King Arthur. The father of King Arthur was Uther Pendragon. And of course, that's a Cornish name, Pendragon, the head of the dragon. We're all familiar with these, normal translations of this story into Wales, into Britannia. But that's not what it says, of course. And so we see here at the top, it actually says Uther ben Dragon.
That's Hebrew.
Precisely. And here we see, this is a Welsh version. So this is actually written in Welsh. And it says Uther ben Dragon. So it's not Ben Dragon. It's two words, Ben Dragon, the son of the dragon. In Hebrew, as you say.
I wonder if that was like an order or something, because in Transvaal we have the Order of the Dragon through Vlad Dracul was the son of somebody who was in the Order of the Dragon, and they called him Ben Dragon.
Yeah, but I think this is not a dragon as we understand it. Of course, because it's supposed to come from Wales, we understand this as a dragon. Mm-hmm. But I think it's actually talking about a Dagon, which is Hebrew for fish.
Okay.
So it's Uther, the son of the fish. And the reason he would be the son of the fish is because we're talking about the great month of Pisces.
Okay.
And we will look at that. In fact, we could look at that now, since we're talking about the son of Pisces. The birth narrative for King Arthur, this is in Geoffrey of Monmouth. The birth narrative and conception narrative, the conception of King Arthur is the same as Hercules. So they've borrowed the story of Hercules and they've turned it into the conception story for King Arthur. So you can see what they're doing when they're making these stories. But then it goes on and says, there was a portent in the sky. There was this big comet with two rays. One of the rays pointed towards King Arthur, and the other ray pointed towards Guinevere, because they were brother sister wives, as was always the case in those days. The brother married the sister.
Right. Same thing with Brahma and Saraswati and Abram and Sarai.
Yep, absolutely. They're all brothers and sisters. Even Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
You know how it is, Ralph. Back in the old days, we like to keep it in the family.
Of course, yeah. It's the only way to keep the money together, otherwise you lose all your wealth. So yes, so one of these rays pointed at King Arthur and the other ray pointed at Guinevere. So what were they talking about? Were they talking about a comet, or were they talking about Pisces? Because as you can see in Pisces, there are two rays to Pisces. One ends in a fish and the other ends in another fish, the two fish of Pisces. Well, as it happens, if we go back into Egypt, and I really think the author of King Arthur, so whether it was William of Malmesbury or whether it was the source that he got the story from, had been to Egypt. Because when we go down into Egypt and we look at the Dendera zodiac, we see Pisces. So this is Pisces. The Dendera zodiac, just for those that are not familiar with it, is a standard zodiac in Egypt in one of the big temples, circa, they say, about 3rd century BC. So this is quite an early zodiac. And here is Pisces with the two rays going out, and one of the rays ends in Horus, and the other ray ends in Isis. Isis and Horus, the king and the queen, Arthur and Guinevere. And remember, Guinevere means Friday. Friday is Venus, the day of Venus. That's what Friday is. It's the day of Venus. And Venus is Isis. Isis. So this is Guinevere, and this is the king. This is Horus. So this conception and birth story, the portent in the sky that's given by Geoffrey of Monmouth, comes from this zodiac in Egypt, with the two rays, one ending in Arthur, Horus, and the other ray ending in Guinevere, Isis. It's as if the person is sitting there underneath this zodiac and looking at it and describing it to us. And there's a good reason for doing this, because we're talking about the great month of Pisces. And the great month of Pisces started in AD 10. And it started with King Jesus, of course. That's why Jesus was born as a lamb of God, but became a fisher of men.
So this is really profound. What you're conveying here is literal. That we have maybe people from the Norman Night era who have visited Egypt, and they are standing underneath the ceiling at the temple of Esna, where the 300 BC zodiac is. The Dendera one is a copy from about 81 BC. But the zodiac originates from about 300 BC, like you said. It's Temple of Esna in Egypt, and you're literally saying somebody was standing under that, looking at that. When they were putting this together, it's because they were looking at these pictures.
Yep, and this is the era of the Crusades. If anyone was going to be in Egypt at this time, it was going to be at this time when the Crusades started.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated with this because 4 years ago, I released a series of videos about how Genesis was actually constructed, and showing where scholars identified colophons in the text that mirror cuneiform writings, but it seems like it's too visual in an abbreviated version of a much larger corpus of materials, as if the Jews in Babylon were looking at these amazing stories in temples in Babylon and putting together a Genesis narrative based off visuals they were looking at. You're describing the exact same thing, but in Norman times.
Yeah, and the Dendera zodiac is processional. So if anyone was going to understand the great month of Aries starting in AD 10, it was the people who made this zodiac. So this is the Dendera zodiac in outline. And you can see the figures in purple are the standard zodiac constellations. And they are offset to one side of the zodiac. Why? Because this is a processional zodiac, and the other circle that will mate with it is the processional circle. So we have the celestial circle, which is the standard circle you see in the sky with the Earth rotating, and then the processional circle, the ecliptic circle, as it were, is the rotation every 26,000 years of the precession of the equinox. And that's how they look in the sky. If you look up into the sky, you have these two intersecting circles. It was known in Arthurian legend as Arthur's cosmic cart, because you have these two big wheels in the sky. And so the Dendera zodiac has two axes. If you draw a line between these two circles, it points at the conjunction between Taurus, here is Taurus, and Aries, here is Aries. And the conjunction between those two constellations is 1750 BC. That's when the great month of Taurus turned into the great month of Aries.
And this axis here is the only one that actually forms the vesicle Pisces.
Yes. That it's strange that they've organized it like this. They're saying this is the conjunction between Taurus and Aries, but when you look at the layout of the entire composition, so these are the months of the seasons of the year, and so you can draw a line between the seasons going straight up through this zodiac, and that hits the conjunction between Aries and Pisces. And that is, of course, is AD 10, when the great month of Aries turned into Pisces.
And what's interesting about AD 10 right here is I have a book on the Dendera zodiac, and the researchers published that one of these axes ends exactly at AD 17 for the completion of the temple. The temple was totally done in AD 17.
Right. They were all tracking this. I'm pretty sure they were all tracking the precession of the equinox. That's why Alexander wore the horns of a ram, because he was a king of Aries. But Jesus was identified with a fish because he was a king of Pisces. And of course, within Arthurian legend, we end up with the line of Fisher Kings. Why are they called Fisher Kings? Well, because they are the kings of Pisces, the same as Jesus was. So they're all looking at the precession of the equinox. And I like this character here. I've drawn him in slightly different colors. This, by his position, is the great bear. But here he's drawn as the great hippo. So I think originally in Egypt, he was the great hippo. But when the story moved north, they had no idea what a hippopotamus was. And so they said he was the great bear instead. And that's where the name for Arthur comes from, because he is the great bear. He is Arcturus, the bear. And that is important because we'll come on to the zodiac in a minute.
Yeah, the bear is the closest to the pole star.
Yes, that's right. It's the northern constellation that you can always see in the sky. So that's a good introduction to the fact that this is a European story rather than being a British or Welsh story. And this goes on because when you read things like History of the Grail, this is part of the Vulgate cycle, the huge, great 5,000-page corpus of Arthurian legend, which I would not recommend because it'll just send you to sleep. The one to get, which is much more interesting, is effectively like a summary of the Vulgate cycle, is this one, Merlin and the Grail, which is a nice, concise sort of 150 pages. And that's much easier to read. But between the two of these, they have a lot of heresies within them. And one of the heresies...
I noticed it said Arimathea on the cover.
Yes, indeed. Because it's all about, well, that's the heresy, isn't it? Joseph of Arimathea,
yep,
Merlin, and Percival. Now, what's the problem there? What's the heresy? It's the wrong date.
Yeah, it's anachronism. There's no doubt.
What's Joseph of Arimathea got to do with it? Well, we'll see in a minute, because the date is all over the place. So the problem is that when it's describing these people, within the history of the Holy Grail in the Vulgate cycle, we have two characters. One is called Josephus, and the other is called Joseph. And Josephus is the son of Joseph. And Josephus is a scribe and knight working for the Romans.
Oh, so you're talking about the Flavian.
Well, this is the problem. It says things like the good knight, who is Percival, so one of the knights of the Round Table, was of the lineage of Joseph of Arimathea. Okay, so we're linking Arthurian knights back to Joseph of Arimathea. And this Joseph was Percival's mother's uncle, i.e. his nephew, that had been a soldier of Pilate for 7 years. So it's saying that Joseph of Arimathea was working for Pilate for 7 years. Elsewhere, it says he was working for Vespasian for 7 years.
So this is linking to Paul now.
Yes, this is the trouble. Of this same lineage, the good knight for whom this high history was treated. Oh, this comes from high history. We'll have to have a look at that. Iglaze was his mother's name, and King Fisherman was his uncle. And the head of the lineage on his father's side was Nicodemus. Now, what it's saying is that Percival is the nephew of Joseph of Arimathea. But Joseph of Arimathea is a first century character.
Right.
I say from the AD 60s, of course, in my revised chronology, but whatever, he's a first century character. And one of the knights of the Round Table was his nephew.
So we have a problem trying to bridge 800 years.
Yeah, at least 600, yeah. And then it says, King Hermit came from the forest and could not find his nephew. His nephew is Percival again, the Arthurian knight. And he is right sorrowful, and he is mounted on a white mule that he had there. She had a star on her forehead in the shape of a red cross. Josephus, the good clerk, tells us that this same mule belonged to Joseph of Arimathea at the time when he was Pilate's soldier. And he bequeathed it to King Pelles, who is another king of Arthurian times. So this donkey was 600 years old, or we're talking about the first century. So time and time again, when we read these books, it's actually pointing towards these characters being first century characters. Now,
well, you're speaking my language, because I'm already of the opinion. I'm not a follower of Fomenko, because for where Fomenko and I, as chronologists, totally disagree, is that Fomenko believes that we're missing centuries and that the calendars have been altered. I don't believe we're missing any years. I believe they can be accounted for. I believe that we're dealing with redacted histories, and someone has gone in and rewritten text based off older precedents and mixed things that were formerly completely separate.
And so there is a good reason for doing that as well. This history has been deliberately manipulated, as we
absolutely
will see later. And this has been noticed, of course. I'm not the first to notice this, but I'm one of the first to write about it, because most people ignore these chronological problems. So Nietzsche, who's known as the father of Arthurian legend research, 1903 he's American, and he says, because we have these two characters, we have Joseph of Arimathea and his son called Josephus. And Josephus is the author of Arthurian legend. You might see the problems here. Anyway, he says, the role of Josephus is of greater importance in our work than Joseph. It is Josephus to whom we owe the tale. He is known as the good clerk and the good hermit. Twice the text calls him Joseph, and twice he is called Josephus. Nevertheless, it is now generally supposed that this confusion between these two Josephs, Joseph of Arimathea and Josephus Flavius the historian, gave rise to the legend of Joseph and his son Josephus, as mentioned above.
Got you. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And Brugger goes on one stage further. So this comes from Ernst Brugger. And he wrote Zeitschrift für Französische Sprache und Literatur. He's German, of course, 1906. He's another Arthurian researcher and author. And he writes, because even if Josephus Flavius was very well known as a historian, and even much respected and held as a Christian historian, it remains striking that he could record events from British history, Arthurian legend, that occurred many centuries after his death. I think these oddities are only the result of a confusion. The problem here is that 3 of these books say that Arthurian legend was written by Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian from the 1st century, the Jewish historian who wrote the history of the Jewish wars and the history of the New Testament. According to my work, he actually edited or wrote the New Testament.
Oh, he was prolific, right? We got Antiquities of the Jews, Against Appian, Wars of the Jews. So you did produce some data linking him to the identity of the real Paul, not the fictionalized version of Paul. But
yes, because I say he was Paul. This is my big contention from back in 1996 when I wrote about it, that Paul, I normally call him Saul. Saul was Josephus. They are the same person. And that there are many reasons for thinking that, including them both being on the same ship that was shipwrecked on Malta.
Right.
And being taken to Rome, as we discussed before. So there are many links and comparisons between these 2 people. The only problem being, of course, that it puts the biblical story back. It cannot be AD 20s, AD 30. It has to be AD 60s, AD 70. But that fits in with what Josephus Flavius says when he describes the crucifixion event. And he says the crucifixion of a king called, Jesus, happened in AD 70 after the Jewish revolt. So my chronology of the New Testament is that it all happened in the AD 60s and Jesus was crucified in AD 70.
Oh, I'm absolutely on board with that, because right here on my channel, Ralph, I've got 2 or 3 videos where I go through the 1st century historians, and we got like 20 different first century historians for which we have really good material from. And if there would have been a massive earthquake and a sun darkening episode, it would have been recorded by they didn't miss the eclipses, they didn't miss the natural disasters. If there would have been some major events that have happened anytime before AD 70, they would have been very well recorded. So I'm on board with you that all these events had to have been after AD 70, after the fall of Jerusalem, after the Romans had destroyed Masada. It would have been yeah. That's why your King of Edessa theory resonates so much with me, because it answers why we have a historical dearth of information prior to the AD 60s. None of this was in the AD 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, any of that time.
Yeah, the major cataclysm, of course, that they're sort of alluding to there is the Jewish revolt. When Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, the people were scattered. That was, a cataclysm.
Right.
That happened,
it sure was.
Yeah, that happened in AD 70.
You get 55,000 people sold into slavery, and 1.2 to 1.5 million people died of the sword, and the rest of them are scattered out in the diaspora. That's a cataclysm.
Yeah. And the problem is, we might as well go into it now, I suppose. The problem for the Templars is that when they went to Edessa, they discovered this story. So effectively, they discovered my book, Jesus, King of Edessa. they discovered that story. But what can you do with it? It's heretical. If you mention that story back in the 12th century, you'll be burnt at the stake.
Right.
So the only thing you can do is keep it within a secret society. Hence, the Knights Templar were formed at this very time. That's one way of keeping it secure. The other thing you can do is you can change the names of the people maybe a little bit, change the date a little bit, and you can recast this story as a king of, where shall we do it? How about a king of Britannia? That's far enough away from Judea that no one will suspect that they are the same story. And we'll tell this story about a king of Britannia who does all the same things as the Jesus character does. So what I'm saying in my huge, great book is that Arthurian legend is the New Testament. It's the historical New Testament recast into the 6th century, because they didn't want you to know that Jesus was a real king.
Wow.
And that's why the Arthurian king has so many links to the sort of gospel story. It is the same story. That's why we have the Fisher Kings, the kings of Pisces. Just as Jesus was a king of Pisces, he was the fisher of men, the first of the Fisher Kings. When we go through it, there are many links between these two stories.
So it didn't help that in the 6th century, we had worldwide economic fallout, plagues, earthquakes. The sun didn't appear for 18 months, starvation. It didn't help that we had the Dark Ages. So literacy plummeted. By the time of the Normans, it was the Normans that actually brought the idea into Europe of building universities after the Arabic model. So like you said, Norman knights had been to Egypt, and they were in Egypt looking at these old temples with these zodiacs. So they brought that information back, because it was the 11th century and 10th century when all of a sudden the Normans were building stone castles all over Europe. They're building these massive keys and canal and locking systems. Venice was modernized according to Norman standards. We have it was the 10th and 11th century. The Normans spearheaded the building of all the universities started at that time period and afterward. What else was it? It wasn't just the universities. The cathedrals. The cathedrals were begun at that time period from the older, synagogue and church models. They brought all that, but they brought it all from the Mediterranean world, really, except the cathedrals were something new, because the cathedrals were very European, very Norman in their
yes. And that Dark Ages was very useful, because if you throw this story into the Dark Ages, it can go missing, because nobody knew what was going on in the Dark Ages. There was nothing to contradict it. No one would know or suspect.
It did go missing in Italy, and it appeared in Britain.
Yes, that's right. You could put this new story back in the Dark Ages, and it could just sort of disappear into the darkness. No one would know if it was historical or whether it was fictional.
That's amazing.
That's exactly what they did. And they did it because you could not be burnt at the stake for telling a suspect history of the Britons. And only if you understood what was going on in this story would you understand that this was a historical account of the historical Jesus in Judea. And so people in the Catholic Church probably had no idea what it was talking about. They just thought it was nonsense, like William of Newburgh thought it was nonsense, because they hadn't been initiated into the true meaning of this story.
Yeah, the Catholics were too busy trying to create flying saints and stuff at the time.
Yeah. So they can tell stories about, like, the wounded king. Now, this was hugely heretical. You would not get away with mentioning this about Jesus. So within Arthurian legend, we have the famous line of Fisher Kings, and most of the Fisher Kings were also the wounded king. And the wounded king who was wounded between the thighs. And because he was wounded between the thighs, the land became a wasteland. And the quest of the knights was to renew the king, to heal the king, so the lands would be healed as well. So what is that talking about? Well, it's talking about New Testament events, of course, because people probably don't realize, but Jesus asked for the disciples to castrate themselves. So Jesus said, comes from Matthew 19:12. There are some eunuchs who were born from their mother's womb, and there were some eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men. But there are some eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He is able to receive it. Let him receive it.
Right.
So this is Jesus asking for the disciples to castrate themselves. And
they're a better man than I am.
Yeah.
They're a better man than I am, because it ain't going to happen. Yeah.
This is part of the galley.
Right.
Now, the galley were the galley priests of Cybele or Kibel, who were prevalent in Judea and especially in the Galilee region. And the contention is that Jesus was a Galilean. He's called a Galilean in the New Testament.
Right.
And Josephus Flavius calls the galley priests, these eunuch galley priests, because the galley priests of Kibel were all eunuchs. He calls them Galileans.
Wow.
And Jesus was, of course, a Galilean. So we're linking the New Testament Church of Jesus and James back to the galley priests of the East. And that is why Jesus was asking for his disciples to castrate themselves. And that's probably what they did. That's why when, they had the night meeting on the Mount of Olives, and they were surprised by the Roman guard, and the little boy or the young man escapes naked. Why was that? It was probably a ceremony to initiate the new priest or high priest of the galley. That's why he was naked, because he was about to be castrated. Now we have we have various descriptions of this. We have from Lucian. This was well known in the Roman era. I mean, the galley is well known. It's right. Not something that's unusual. Lucian says, on these days, men become the galley, the Galileans. While some are playing flutes and performing rites, a frenzy comes upon many, and he throws off his clothes and rushes to the center with a great shout, and he takes up a sword and castrates himself. Then he rushes through the city holding his testicles in his hands, and he takes female clothing and women's adornments from whichever house he throws the testicles into. So these were the testicle tossers of Judea.
Yeah, I'm not. Hey, so real quick to interject, from what I gather in my own research, there was a Babylonian queen named Semiramis. Semiramis has gone down in the historical record for want of an earlier source. The Greek writers claim that she is the first queen to actually require all the men in her service to be castrated, and as eunuchs they would serve her because they could see her naked, help her bathe, do all these kind of things, and be bed warmers and all that, but they didn't have their sexual organs anymore. And Semiramis of Babylon was the first one to require that, and it became a Babylonian custom after that. And this just might be the origin of where the Jews who had been indentured servants in Babylon for a while got circumcision from.
Well, it also goes back to the Nazarenes. And remember, Jesus was a Nazarene as well.
Right.
And the Nazarene, they honored the primeval Adam. And the primeval Adam was androgynous. So he had no sexual organs. Man. And we can go into why that is.
You know what? It's guaranteed that you never know what direction we're gonna go when we talk to you, man.
So yes, so there was this cult of the castrated eunuchs, even within Egyptian / Judean history as well. And they were a sect, and they were known as the Galileans. They were known as the Nazarene. And of course, Jesus was a Nazarene, and he was called a Galilean. He was called a Galilean in Luke 23:6, if anyone wants to look it up. But Josephus Flavius, we come back to our favorite historian, he describes the Galileans. And Jesus was a Galilean, remember. So Josephus says, the Galileans, this is during the Jewish revolt. So this is actually the wartime, the actual civil war with Rome, as it were. The Galileans indulged themselves in feminine wantonness. They decked their hair and put on women's garments, and they had paints under their eyes and imitated not only the ornaments, but the lusts of women. While their faces looked like the faces of women, they killed with their right hands. And while their gait was effeminate, they attacked men and became warriors. And they drew their swords from under their finely dyed dresses and ran everybody through that they came.
Golly, this sounds like the Sakari. This sounds like...
Oh, precisely. Yeah, this is a good description of this.
We got transgender assassins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But this is from Arthurian legend as well, remember, because Percival, who was, the favorite of the Round Table, he castrated himself because he wanted to become the new wounded king, the wounded fisher king. This is from don't know what I've done with it. Anyway,
I thought you were going to say the connection to being wounded had something to do with the symbolism of the king of Edessa wearing an actual thorned crown, like Jesus was wounded with the crown of thorns. But you went straight to a man's belt. Man.
I think that symbolism I think comes from the sacred stone, which we will look at as well.
Right.
But I think Percival, the high priest especially, not all of the priests, but the high priest especially, had to be a castrated eunuch. And it says in Merlin Grail that Percival was tempted by the devil in the form of a woman. And the only way who was tempting him into lust, and the only way he could get himself out of this problem was to castrate himself, which he does. So Percival actually became a galley. And that is why, because even before this, I said that Percival was Galahad. So we have Percival and Galahad are the two main knights of the Round Table. They're never sort of together. They're always in separate chapters. And it seemed pretty obvious that Percival was Galahad. It was the same person. But of course, that would be natural because when he castrated himself, he became the galley. The Galahad means the chief galley. So his name was Percival the Galahad. And that is, of course, one of the primary knights of the Round Table. And that was also a part of the New Testament story. That's why Jesus asked his disciples to castrate themselves.
Somebody made a comment somebody made a comment right here that the only eyewitnesses to Jesus's resurrection were the three Marys, the females.
Yes.
So would this have something to do with the castration ritual?
Could be. I've not really thought about that, but yes, that's very true.
I'm only associating it to the idea of resurrection. We're not actually talking about somebody flying up into the sky. We're actually talking about a ritual where a man is basically reborn into a eunuch.
Yep. Very true. And of course, people might say this has nothing to do with, this is all very strange, nothing to do with the modern world. But of course, this still happens in the modern world. Percival,
not my world.
Percival Galahad.
Not my world.
Yeah, not in your world. Percival Galahad was the Red Knight. And so we have the Red Knight in a red dress, pretending to be a woman and being castrated. And of course, if we go down to Rome, we find that modern cardinals...
Man, we're almost turning Monty Python into history.
They still wear a red dress, the same as Percival, the Galahad, used to. Not sure if
Wow,
this guy is castrated or not, but you can make up your own mind on that.
that's amazing. So
So
we're looking at Gali, and Galu is maybe originally the area was called Galilee because, according to the historians of the time, 200 to 230 years before the Christian period, the area had been occupied by Gauls on their way toward France from somewhere further close to Turkey, I guess. But just like the Thracians north of Macedonia, their origin was toward Turkey. The Macedonians themselves recorded their origin was toward Turkey. In Lydia, they'd all moved this way, and maybe later on, Galu or Gali had become associated with this cult and all that. But in the geographers of like the 3rd and 4th century BC, the area was occupied by Gauls for a while. It was
well,
Gauls that were causing Italy all kinds of drama.
well, that's true, but I don't think it's quite the full story, because Gaul in this region is north of Galilee. And I think that's what they were talking about there. But Galilee itself it means circle.
Okay.
And we'll
Like
see
Gilgal, the old Hebrew circles.
Yes, that's exactly where it comes from. But they say it's because Galilee is a circular lake, but that's not the reason. The reason is the zodiac, and we'll look at that in just 1 minute. I was just going to show this because it still happens. These are the Hijra from India, and they are still Gali. They still castrate themselves and dress up as women, and they even wear they've still got the headdress of Kibel, although they probably wouldn't know this is Kibel, but there we go. And this is Saras from Arthurian legend. This is a stained glass window. And Saras, city of Saras, of course, Saras means eunuchs. So this is the city of the eunuchs.
Wow.
And in my estimation, they are talking about Palmyra here in the Syrian desert.
Okay.
So again, they're talking about the east. And this is Palmyra. I was the last person almost to see this.
Do they tear it down?
This was blown up.
Oh.
We are displaying, aren't we?
Yeah, we're displaying.
Good. It was blown up by ISIS. They blew the whole thing up.
Wow.
Destroyed the whole thing, unfortunately. But there we go. But talking of circles, I'm not sure if we went through this last time or not. Galilee means circle. And if you go to the shores of the Sea of Galilee, you find this. Did we talking about the zodiacs from? Anyway.
Yeah, you and I talked about this before.
Yeah, just very quickly then. This is on the Sea of Galilee. This is a Jewish zodiac, a Nazarene Jewish zodiac on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, which was owned by Jesus.
Is this the one at the Bet Alpha?
Bet Alpha is I don't like that one so much. That's not so. It's very crude, as it were.
Okay, I've got files on Bet Alpha and the other
Hamat Tavera. This one. This is Hamat Tavera.
That's right. That's it.
But Josephus Flavius describes this one, and it says that it was owned by Jesus of Gamala Saphias. And of course, previously I'd already linked Jesus of Gamala with the biblical Jesus. And so when they're talking about Galilee being a circle, are they talking about the actual lake being a circle, or are they talking about these famous zodiacs? Because in this area, there were quite a few of them. Here's another one. This is Sepphoris. Here's another zodiac, Jewish zodiac, of course, processional zodiac. Here's another one. Here's a Christian zodiac. This one is at Bet Shean, which is on the southern shore of the Sea of Galilee. This is a Christian one, obviously. It's been reinterpreted in Christian terms, with Jesus and Mary in the middle and 12 disciples round the outside. 12 disciple months. This is from the 6th century. This one at Hamat-Tavera. This, according to my estimation, is 1st century. That's why it was owned by Jesus of Gamala Saphias, as narrated by Josephus Flavius. And this is important because, of course, we come to the famous Round Table. So what is the Round Table of Arthur? Well, in Merlin Grail, we have a description of the round tables, and there were 3 round tables. There was the round table of the Last Supper. So the Last Supper table was not rectangular like Leonardo da Vinci has.
Yeah, Da Vinci. Was it Michelangelo or Da Vinci that painted that?
That was a Da Vinci one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's always shown as a long, straight, rectilinear table.
I think that is partly artistic, so you can get all of the disciples around it and see them all, which is more difficult with a round one. But it's said that the Last Supper table was a round table with 12 disciples. And of course, that is a zodiac. And then the second table, there were 3 tables, they were copies of each other. The second table was the round table of Joseph of Arimathea and his 12 disciples. And the third table was the table of King Arthur and his 12 knights. So the 12 knights of Arthur and the 12 disciples of Jesus are the same thing. The round tables are all copies of each other. They are the same manifestation. So here's another link with the gospel story that Jesus had his own knights of the round table, disciple knights of the round table. But all of these round tables were zodiacs. And so
which knight represents Aquarius here?
I didn't get round to actually associating each knight with a particular constellation, but obviously, yes,
one of those knights. I would like to find out what his name is.
That would be an interesting project, actually. You know, every constellation has a sort of character to go with it.
Right.
No doubt that, you know, each knight or disciple has their own character, and they choose a suitable character. You know, Percival sat in the dangerous seat. What is it called? Anyway. Anyway, there's a story about Percival being in the most dangerous seat that sat next to Jesus. But if this was a zodiac, let's go back to Hamat-Tavera. We have the 12 constellations, the 12 knights, the 12 disciples, surrounding the sun god Jesus figure in the center. So if we're having a round table, what we should have is this sort of table.
Oh, it's a nice picture, man.
Yeah, I don't know which film this came from. This comes from an Arthurian Hollywood film, of course. And this is how the table should look. So we have the 12 knights around the perimeter, and the Jesus Arthur figure should sit in the middle.
Ralph, go ahead and carry on for about 2 minutes. I got somebody going to sit in right now because I'm on my 4th cup of coffee and I got to relieve it.
Yeah, okay, I can waffle on while you disappear.
Oh man, let me get my.
And so this is where we get the name for King Arthur.
How you doing, Ralph?
Okay, because if you have a zodiac, you can sort of look down upon the cosmos, as it were, and you can see the constellations around in a circle and the sun in the center. And that's what we see in these normal zodiacs. We are looking down with the constellations around, circling around the sun and the earth. You can even see that Helios, the sun, is actually holding the earth in his gravitational grasp. So that's one way of looking at the constellations in a zodiac. But the alternative is you can, and I don't have a picture of it here, But you can imagine you're looking up at the night sky and looking at the Earth rotating around the celestial pole with the 12 constellations going round and round the outside. And of course, in the center at the North Pole, aiming at the North Pole, is Ursa Major, the Great Bear. So a zodiac can have either in the center of it the sun figure, or it can have Ursa Major. And if we look at the Hamat Tavera one, they've chosen to put the Jesus character, the sun god character, in the center. But the alternative would be to have the Great Bear in the center. And of course, Arthur, King Arthur, was named after the Great Bear. So the central character of the Round Table zodiac, is either the Jesus character or the Arthur, the Great Bear character. They are in the same situation. And that, I believe, is how they transferred the name from the Jesus character to King Arthur. That's how they chose that name. And since we're looking at the Last Supper table, I'm not sure if we've been through these before, but there is the big secret of the Last Supper table, in that who is St. John sitting on the right hand of Jesus. Now, this is a standard Last Supper table, a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's, but this is fairly recent. This is 19th century marble from Drogheda Cathedral, which is in Ireland, so in Catholic Christian Ireland. And they they sculpted this altarpiece. And so who sits at the right hand side of Jesus in this picture? Male or female? Well, it's female, quite obviously. So the disciple on the right hand side of Jesus was female. It was Mary Magdalene, his wife. So this is, again, it's a secret that's been held in plain sight for hundreds, thousands of years. And lots of people have known about this. And so if you go up to Turku, this is in northern Finland. The old capital of Finland is called Turku. And this is the main cathedral there. And again, this is an altarpiece at the back of the altar, just behind the altar. And again, a very standard Last Supper scene with St. John on the right-hand side of Jesus. But is that male or female? I think most people will say, yes, that's female. Not only is it female, but it's got the colors of Mary Magdalene, of course. Mary, the mother, was always dressed in blue and white, whereas Mary Magdalene was dressed in orange and green, or gold and green sometimes. So she's even wearing the colors of Mary Magdalene. And here's another one. This is the Last Supper scene of Napoleon. This, I think, is actually a mosaic, so it's very intricate. It's quite large, this one, commissioned by Napoleon. And again, it's an exact copy of the Leonardo da Vinci. And again, looking at the right-hand side of Jesus, who do we see here? Male or female? Well, we can zoom in and have a quick look. And here she is. I think you can all agree that this is female. Well, apart from our Prime Minister, of course, who didn't know what a woman was. But there we go. That's a very strange modern idiosyncrasy. But quite clearly, this is a woman on the right-hand side of Jesus. And again, she is dressed in the colors of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is always portrayed with orange and green. And there she is with her golden hair. She was always famed for her golden or ginger hair. This was the ginger monarchy they were mostly ginger. So where can we go from here?
So while I was gone, I don't know if you covered this, but it was a Near Eastern tradition that I mean, we get it all. Even in modern colloquial, it's the right hand of power, your right hand man, the source of your power, or the source of your monarchy, the source of whatever authenticates your position, and whatever you're doing is always on the right. He is always positioned to the right of you. Even the corporate seating today in Fortune 500 companies, when they sit in their offices and all that, the person on the right of the head of the table is normally pretty much the highest person in the company, other than the owner or whoever's at the head of the table. So it's very interesting that the right hand of Jesus in all these is female.
Yeah, is his wife. Yeah, Mary Magdalene. A natural place, I suppose, because if you read the Nag Hammadi Gospels, she was said to be the prime disciple. So the primary disciple was not Peter, it was actually Mary Magdalene. So yes, she should be on the right-hand side of Jesus. So he chose his wife as being his right-hand man, lady. And they are all ginger. This. Did we go through the Archaix mosaic? Do I have a better picture? This is a zoomed-in picture. This is the character I've got on the front of my Jesus King of Edessa book. But he's
certainly a redhead.
Yeah, he's ginger, of course. But the interesting thing is this mosaic was found after I had printed my book.
Wow.
So my picture came first, and then they discovered this 5 years later.
Wow.
And do we have the full Archaix mosaic? Because that's interesting to go through. I'm going to have to stop sharing, and I think and come out of that and quickly go and find an image.
Well, Egypt has a long history of dislike toward redheads. They are.
Well, quite a lot of them were redhead. I mean, I've been writing about this for a while now.
Yes, I believe the Hyksos were the Shepherd Kings.
Yes. Well, Ramesses the Great was ginger, and so was Cleopatra. She was ginger.
Yeah, she was. Well, almost all the Macedonians were. She was a Ptolemy, so she's of Macedonian blood.
Yeah. Now we know this for. Well, she was Macedonian, but they had married into the Egyptian line, and I think also the Macedonians were exiles from Egypt. So okay. We had these exiles. We had the Great Exodus. We had the Little Exodus of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And we have the story of Danas going to Argos. Argos is
Greece. Yeah. And Cecrops also left with a fleet from Egypt.
Yeah. So I think Greece was infused with a lot of Egyptian, Hyksos Egyptian aristocracy who took over that region. So the aristocracy of Greece would have been naturally ginger if they had been descended from the Hyksos and descended from Ramesses the Great. The mummy of Ramesses the Great was taken to France. This was in the 70s, 80s, for preservation because it was beginning to deteriorate. So they took it to the the Paris Forensic Laboratory. Yeah. And they determined that Ramesses the Great was ginger, true ginger, nothing to do with the mummification process.
Yeah, I should have clarified a little bit because in my own research, Ralph, I'm always telling my community the difference because there's always been two Egypts, two kingdoms, and there are 400 miles of desert between them. But Hollywood gives us a version of one Egypt, and like the Valley of the Kings, the Great Pyramid, this is all, but it's not true. Northern Egypt, which is Lower Egypt on the Mediterranean, has always been very cosmopolitan. Deeper Egypt, far to the south, 400 miles to the south. That's when I'm saying Egyptian, I'm really meaning those people. It's those people to the south where Waset, Kemishia, Thebes, Karnak, Abydos. Those Egyptians always had a problem with the north because the north was cosmopolitan. It was very Mediterranean.
And quite often they were at war with each other as well. They
Yes,
had these
absolutely,
civil wars
absolutely.
between them. So that was the process by which we had the Exodus. There was a civil war between North and South.
Right. I should have clarified when I meant they had a hatred toward the a lot of the redheaded. That's what I really meant. The southern Egyptians, because it's all over the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead, they demonized the Set, the children of Set, the people that built the ladder of Set. And they identify the children of Set as the Typhonians, and the Typhonians are described as redheaded. But
and yes, the Hyksos venerated Seth, of course, Typhon.
Absolutely.
That was their primary god, yes. So have I brought up a mosaic there on a screen share?
Oh, you did. I was running my mouth. Hold on. There we go.
Good, thanks. So this is the Hyksos. This is the Huqoq mosaic. And this was discovered, as I say, about 5 years after my book came out, even though I put this character on the front of my book. And this was sold to National Geographic as being Alexander the Great seeing the high priest of Jerusalem and presenting him with a sacrificial calf. Now, this is utter nonsense. This is History for Sale by Professor Jody Magnus, was the lead archaeologist on this dig. But I knew what this was as soon as I saw it, because I'd already written about this in my Jesus King of Edessa book. This is nothing to do with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was never bearded, for a start. And he wouldn't have, you can see he's got a Jewish payot. He's got a side lock of hair. Alexander was not Jewish. He would not have worn a side lock of hair. So this king is a Jewish king, obviously. And so, no, the story that this is Alexander the Great is absolute nonsense. This is Bar Kamsa from the Talmud. So the Talmud tells the story of Bar Kamsa, who was the leader of the Jewish revolt. We're back to the same old era we've always been talking about.
Right.
Who came with a sacrificial calf from Emperor Nero and gave the calf to the high priest of Jerusalem. And he was stirring up trouble because he knew that the high priest of Jerusalem, being so pernickety as they always are, would actually reject the calf. And just to make sure, he nicked the lip. You can even see it's got a nick in his lip to make it imperfect. So doubly, the high priests were going to reject this calf. Now, this was a calf from Emperor Nero. That was going to upset Nero. That was going to foment a war in Judea, which is exactly what this king wanted. So this king here is King Jesus Manu of Edessa, the leader of the Jewish revolt.
Have you read anything about Nero's wife being Poppaea, a Jewish woman?
Well, yes. Well, not sure if he's Jewish. She was Jewish, but she certainly she was friends with Josephus Flavius.
Right.
And gave him many presents. And I made a little story up about this because obviously we don't have the full story as to why she died. But she was a favorite of, Josephus Flavius was a favorite of Poppaea. And she gave him lots of presents. And then just after that, Nero kicked her to death because she was pregnant.
Right. And
just after that, Josephus Flavius skips out of Rome and dashes off back to Judea.
The material I read was painting her as Jewish, and that she was in league with Josephus. I've always called him Josephus, but I will defer to your expertise. But Josephus, and that Nero had kicked her to death, not because she was pregnant, but because her Jewish pedigree had been absolutely concealed from him, and he didn't quite know. And then when he finally learned, she was already pregnant, and this was going to cause some real problems with the Roman Senate.
Well, apparently he kicked her in the stomach because she was pregnant. So I made up the little twist to that story that it was Josephus Flavius that got her pregnant. And
Yeah, man.
Just to add some spice
Yeah, man.
to
You
the story.
get people off of that one.
Because she was well known for having a propensity for young men. And Josephus Flavius at that time would have been a handsome young man. And he skips Rome immediately after this happens and dashes off back to Judea.
It's almost like the story of Justinian and Theodora.
Yes. Yeah, they were full of scandals, weren't they? They really
Yeah,
were.
they were.
But anyway, this character here is Bar Kamsa, and this is the king of Edessa, because it was the Edessan kings who started the Jewish revolt. And the Talmud says that this is the guy who started and led the Jewish revolt. And so the archaeologists who uncovered this are completely wrong. I think they sold this story to National Geographic for hard cash. And National Geographic didn't want the headline story, Bar Kamsa found in Judea, because it doesn't have much of a ring to it, really.
Yeah.
So I think she made up this story that this was Alexander the Great, so they could put on this splash headline saying, Mosaic of Alexander the Great found in Judea. No, it's got nothing to do with Alexander the Great. This is because this was found in a synagogue, of course. And this is the most pivotal event in recent Judean history. So I'm surprised there are not more copies of this mosaic found around Judea. This is the event that started the Jewish revolt, that angered Nero, that started the revolt against Rome, that ended up with the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the exile of the people from the land. So this is absolutely pivotal. All of the diaspora that we see around Europe, all of the persecutions around Europe, all of the return of the Jews back to Israel in recent times, all of these events stem from this image here of the king of Edessa meeting with the high priest of Jerusalem and presenting the sacrificial calf from Emperor Nero, which he knew would be rejected by the high priest. So yeah, that's an interesting, and the interesting thing, of course, is the king of Edessa here is ginger, because this was the ginger monarchy. So that's why I say that Jesus and Mary would have been ginger as well. Mind you, the Dead Sea Scrolls say the same thing. The Dead Sea Scrolls said that the new Messiah will be will have red barley and lentils. And that's how it's translated quite often if you read it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm thinking, red barley and lentils, what are they on about? Well, the word for barley is the same as hair in Aramaic. And of course, barley is a very hairy seed, so that makes sense. So what they're saying is that the new Messiah will be red-haired and lentils. And what do red-haired people always have? They have freckles on their faces. They have lentils all over their faces. So I think that's what it's talking about in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that Jesus was actually.
So just as a counterpoint, I mean, I like to explore counterpoints because they actually strengthen our thesis. I've read a lot of material on Alexander of Macedon before he became Alexander the Great, sitting on the throne of Babylon, 331 BC. And then he dies in 323 BC. You know, he tries to go to India and he finally makes it back, dies, whatever. You know what? Is there a single story about Alexander the Great that features a bull or a calf?
Not that I know of. And he would not have presented a sacrificial calf to the high priest of Jerusalem. He did meet with the high priest of Jerusalem, of course, when he was going down into Egypt. He went through that region.
Yeah, this is after he subdued the Phoenician city of Tyre, right?
Yeah, that's right. And they came out, obviously, and they weren't going to fight against Alexander, so they gave him tribute and whatever.
Yeah, Jerusalem and 100 other unimportant cities back then, because Jerusalem's not even on a trade route. Its importance in the Old Testament is inflated. It's
but there's no way that Alexander would have venerated or
right.
honored the priests of Jerusalem.
Well, I just noticed there's a calf and a cow in there because you drew that to my attention. So I'm automatically trying to associate any Alexander stories, and so it actually lends more credence to the idea that this has nothing to do with the Alexandrian era. So somebody in the comment section, Karl Karsnark, I don't know who he is, but he does say that a Jewish synagogue with realistic human and animal art everywhere, see, not Jewish at all. And while I appreciate the comment, I have several files on Jewish synagogues, and they have a lot of artwork. They got whole zodiacs full of animals. Jewish synagogues do have artwork in them, and they do have friezes and stuff. So I don't know, man. That's
well, yeah. Well, it depends what type of Judaism, of course, because the
I know there's
zodiacs
several
we've just been
kinds.
looking at are all in synagogues.
Yeah,
but they're in Nazarene synagogues, not classical synagogues. So there is a difference. If you just bring up that screen share again, just very quickly. There we go. What was I going to say about that? Oh, yes, that Alexander the Great would not have had a payot. He would not have had a Jewish side lock of hair. So this king here, let's zoom in a bit so we can see it better. This king here must have been Jewish. So we're talking about a Jewish king who was presenting a red calf. Now, where does that story come from? It's the presentation of a red calf to the temple, which is supposed to foretell dramatic events. That's what they're trying to do now. I don't know if you've seen the stories of them presenting a red calf in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I live in Texas.
Right.
The ranch that's producing the red heifers are right here in Texas.
Well, this is the red heifer. You can see this is exactly what they're doing in the first century to foment a dispute, effectively, which is exactly what they're doing now with the red heifer that they're trying to present to the temple now, because they want to establish the new temple of Jerusalem, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the Temple Mount. So they're trying exactly the same trick to do the same thing and present a red calf yet again.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, that's a quick look at the Archaix mosaic. And going back to Arthurian legend, what can we discuss with that? I suppose we could. Did we look at the sacred stones? And
are you talking about like the zodiacal stones, like moonstone and topaz and
the Elagabal?
You're talking about the circle stone, the stone circles, like the Gilgals.
The Elagabal is the sacred stone of Egypt, which ended up in. So we might as well talk about this, because in Arthurian legend, this stone is called the Holy Grail.
Okay.
And so if we're looking for Arthurian history and the Holy Grail, this is central to it. So if we do a quick screen share.
Okay, so I want to, as you're doing that, I want to validate what you had just said about that not being Alexander the Great. Yep. Because another chrono marker in that is it shows elephants.
Yes.
So right here, I just went ahead and just did a little search real quick about usage of elephants in first century Roman provinces, and all the Roman provinces, even part of Turkey and Judea, even in Europe, elephants were in use all throughout the first century and second century. So this it actually confirms, because this is
Edessa especially would have had access to elephants, because the twin brother of Jesus was Judas Thomas, and he went to India in AD 57 to set up the Church of Malabar. And this is the Church of Malabar in southern India, which was the first Christian, well, not Christian, Judaic, Nazarene Judaic church to be established.
Okay.
And it was established in AD 57. So Judas Thomas went to India, which is where these Indian elephants came from. And it was not discovered again until 1500, when the 1501, when the Portuguese went there. So this is the colophons at the front of the book. The Church of Malabar. It's still there. The Church of Malabar is still there in India. It's
excellent. So we don't even have to go as far as India, because according to the authoritative sources, all throughout the period of the Ptolemies, which was this period here, the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids used war elephants against each other. Elephants were used as tractors for heavy equipment. The Romans used elephants for everything. So I'm just curious. When I see things in something, I'll often they'll give clues as to the time period they're being used, and it says it's largely the 2nd century BC is when they started using the elephants for everything. They were rare. They were used one time when most of them died in the Alps when Hannibal attacked Rome, and that's the first time any of those regions of the world saw elephants. And it still took 200 years for anybody to bring any more back.
Yeah, Julius Caesar took an elephant to Britain when he invaded Britain.
That's pretty interesting.
It was either in the first invasion of Britain or in the second, I can't remember, but they took an elephant to scare the Britons. So this was back in the first century BC or 1st century AD, depending on which of the invasions it was. And they took an elephant to Britain as well to scare the locals. So yes, the use of war elephants was quite common. But this is here it was known as the benben. This is the sacred stone of Egypt. So
the Phoenix
Egypt
Mound.
Sorry?
Yeah, I see it says Phoenix Mound up there, and Phoenix and benben are pretty much interchangeable.
Yes. So this is the phoenix standing on the sacred mound of the benben. So awesome. the phoenix was identified as a manifestation of the sun, or perhaps you could say a little piece of the sun that broke off and fell to the earth, because this benben stone is supposed to be a meteorite. And this became very sacred. This is the stone that Jacob rested his head on. If you remember in the story, Jacob put his head on this stone, which they called the pillow stone, which is a very poor translation. And then in the morning, he basted the stone with oils. Now, this is exactly what they do in India when they have the lingam stones in India. They still do exactly that today. They baste the stone in the morning and they redress it with flowers and whatever. It's the same tradition. So this tradition came out of Egypt. The benben was supposed to be at Heliopolis in northern Egypt.
Yeah, and Jacob had a dream, and he saw angels going up and down from heaven on a ladder during that dream. And that Jacob's, I don't know if it's the right stone, but there's been a lot of people who have done some pretty interesting research in the coronation chair stone that they call Jacob's pillow.
Yes, that's that one up in Scotland. We can I'll get through to that one in a minute, but it has a long history before that.
Yes, it does. They fought wars back and forth for that stone.
Yeah, it ended up in Greece. This is Delphi, and this is a copy of what it's supposed to have looked like. It's a conical stone, not very big, so we're only talking about 1.5 feet tall, so fairly small. Supposed to be a meteorite. And here's another one, again from Delphi in Greece. And it was supposed to be covered with these chains. We're not entirely sure what these chains are supposed to be. Because it's cosmic, my explanation is these are what people imagined stars in the sky to be. They imagined all of the stars joined up like seashells on the shore, but joined together and wrapped around this sacred stone. but that's just a guess because we don't know what they were meaning by these. Another possibility is it's lines of longitude and latitude in the sky when you measure the sky, which we now call declination and azimuth. If you're dividing up the sky so you can actually measure where the stars are, you will put a grid across the skies in the heavens above. And that might be what they're talking about here, because they did the same in Parthia. This is Greek Parthia, when all of Iraq and Iran, when it was all Greek after Alexander the Great. So this is one of the Greek kings. This is Apollo sitting on this sacred stone. So you can see it's got the grid pattern across it. Very traditional for the Elagabal, for the Benben stone. The Benben, when it went to Greece, had a name change, and it was called the Omphalos. And then
it was the navel stone, navel of the world.
Navel stone, yes, exactly what they said. But then it came back, and it came back to Edessa. So this is Parthia over here, what they call Armenia and Parthia. This is all modern Iraq and Iran. And the stone came back from Alexander's Greek Parthia, and it came to Edessa because the Edessans claimed to have had this stone, and they put it into the Ark of the Covenant. So this is the Ark of the Covenant when it was at Edessa in the 2nd century, 1st and 2nd century. And you can see here that we have a temple with the sun on the front of it, and inside the temple is a square box, and it's on wheels, so it's in a cart. Now, the square box is a Bethel, a house of God, because it held the image of the God, which was the sacred stone. And so that was the Ark of the Covenant. And here is another image of it in Edessa. Again, it's in a temple with a star on the front, a sun star on the front. Here's the box inside the temple, and you can see it's got little feet on the bottom of it this time. So this is the Ark of the Covenant in a temple in Edessa, which would have held the sacred stone. And here is the Ark of the Covenant, an original Ark of the Covenant. This is 3,000 years old. This is the Ark of Tutankhamun. So these arks were relatively common. They were used quite often for carrying the image of the gods, for carrying tribute sometimes, for carrying documents. But this is exactly as the ark is described in the Old Testament. It even has the rings of brass underneath it to hold the carrying poles. So this is exactly what it would have looked like. This is what they're trying to describe in this coin with the square box in Edessa.
If you were to double the length, it's almost proportionate to the description in Genesis of the Noah's Ark.
Ah, yes. Yeah, well, yes, that's probably a little bit separate, but this is definitely how the Ark of the Covenant would have looked. It would have been an exact copy of this type of ark or carrying chest. Now, when this stone went down into, so it was in Edessa. So let's have a look at this map again. So Edessa is here in northern Syria. You can see the Mediterranean on the left. Here is Syria down below. So Damascus would be down here sort of somewhere. It's in northern Syria. But
looking at the Edessa's proximity to the Parthian domain, no wonder there's elephants. I mean, elephants would have been everywhere.
Yeah, India is just across the Red Sea. The Gulf over there. Yes, they would have had elephants in this region, and yeah, the Antiochans used elephants, as you said, quite a lot. So yes, they would have had elephants there. But this stone went from Edessa down into Emesa, which is another very similar family to the Edessans, but they were in Emesa, which is down at Homs and Hama, which is down near modern Damascus. And here is the stone when it gets down to Emesa. So again, we see it is this conical stone. Let's go back to the Delphi one. You can see this is the Delphi one. And when it gets down into Emesa, it's the same sort of thing. There we go.
Yes.
And again, it's in a temple. And again, it's embossed with the phoenix on the front of it. You can just see the bird there. So it's got two wings either side, body and tail down here, and the head is up the top there. It's embossed with the phoenix. And this is the sacred stone. This is the sacred stone of Arthurian legend. And it was linked with the Grail. So the Grail has three facets at least. It's supposed to be a dish, of course, the Sangreal, the Holy Grail. But the Sangreal can be a San Real, which means the holy blood. So it can be a bloodline at the same time. So we have a different facet of that. And we have a very good description of that in Arthurian legend. When a new Knight of the Round Table is being instructed into the ways of the knight, is being brought into the Knights of the Round Table. And this is Firefits, who was from the East again. A lot of Arthurian legend is about the East. So Firefits came from Baghdad, and he was half white, half black. And so Firefits is being introduced to the Grail. So they're sitting by the round table, and the Grail is paraded in front of him. And the knights, so the Grail is paraded in with a princess holding a green cloth. And the knights say
a
to...
Grail is going to be an extension of the symbol of the Ark. Both of them are containers.
If you're thinking of it in terms of a Grail dish, then yes, but that is only one facet of it.
Okay.
And so what the knights do, they're having a bit of fun. They say to Firefits, "Can you see the Grail?" And he says, "No, all I can see is this beautiful princess holding a green cloth." And of course, all of the knights fall on the floor laughing, because it's a test. We have these tests all the time within Arthurian legend. He can't see the Grail because he doesn't know what he's looking for. He's looking for a dish. He's looking for a Grail platter or something.
Right.
But of course, the Grail is actually the princess herself.
Okay,
the Grail is the bloodline.
this is a so the Grail is going to be a physical symbol, but its more esoteric meaning is basically talking about like the Jews, like with the Jewish bloodlines. You're not Jewish unless your mother was Jewish.
Yes.
So
yes.
So basically, it's matriarchal bloodline is what defines the line.
So the Grail is a womb, and a womb, of course, is a Grail shape as well. And
Gotcha.
that's one of the key elements of the Grail. But then when we come to Wolfram von Eschenbach, he says the Grail is a stone that fell from heaven, a meteorite. And of course, a meteorite comes in as a fiery ball in the sky above. It is the phoenix, which is identified with the fiery phoenix. And
okay, so
Grail,
this does tie into some second millennium BC imagery and traditions where the Phoenix line, they were called the Typhonians, and Typhon and Phoenix in ancient Greek being interchangeable. And the Typhonians were a red-headed race, and southern Egyptians couldn't stand them. They didn't like them. But the red heifer originally, we're talking second millennium BC, The sacrifice of the red heifer only came late. Originally, they sacrificed these red-headed men when they caught them, and they would deliver these red-headed men. Now, this isn't me theorizing. I have pulled this out of books from the 17 and 1800s, and I have showed my community where this research came from. It blew my mind, because it was talking about Phoenix was representative of an ancient bloodline, and they had this knowledge, this astronomical knowledge. And when the southern Egyptians would catch them, they would wait, and they would stay in dungeons until certain festivals, and then they would sacrifice them. But over a period of time, they quit sacrificing red-headed men and women, and they started and they changed it in Egypt. They changed it to a red heifer, and we know a lot of Hebrew history, like the Ark of the Covenant, comes straight out of Egypt. So it's just this is material that I put out in the last 6 months or so, on Archaix.
Yeah, on a very similar line, I call them the ginger monarchy, because so many of these monarchs were ginger, even through to all of the monarchs of Britannia, pretty much have been redheads.
I think Boudicca was redheaded. The British warrior queen.
Sorry,
Boudica,
which one?
How do you say her name? Boudicca?
Boudica, yes.
Boudica, okay, yeah.
Well, they used to say Boadicea, but it's more correctly known.
That's the Latin, isn't it? Boadicea.
Yeah. So this was the stone when it was in Syria, owned by the Emessans, which is down by Damascus, and they were another powerful royalty who were very similar to the Edessans, and I'm sure there is a family link between these two royal lines, which I must try and find out. But we don't have a lot of history of the Emessans from Damascus. But anyway, they became powerful in the 2nd/3rd century, and one of their sons became emperor of Rome, and that is Elagabalus. Not many people know about Emperor Elagabalus. That wasn't his real name. That's his name that he was given afterwards, because he was a disciple of the Elagabal stone. And you can see the stone here.
Oh, look at the phoenix on that stone.
Yeah, it's the same as here. It's very eroded here, so you can't see it very well, but you can see the phoenix on the stone there. This is in Syria, when it was in Syria, and then it goes to Rome.
That phoenix.
And there you can see the phoenix properly on it.
Yeah, I just screenshot that. I just stole that from you, Ralph. That's going in my
this is
file.
A really good gold coin from Rome, so you can actually see what it looks like. And this is they now call it the Elagabal, so it had a name change again. This was the
It's post-mortem.
Elagabal, it means the mountain of God. So you will find different translations sometimes on this, but Gabal means mountain. We know that. That's Aramaic. But Ella, they make some very strange translations of that. But we have two descriptions of this coin. In Greek, it's known as the Helios Gabal, Heliogabal. And in Aramaic, it's the Elagabal. And it's quite obvious that the Ella came from Helios. It's the same God figure. So El, when you read the Old Testament, El or Elohim is the sun god, the same as Helios is. So Elagabal means the mountain of the sun god. And you can see it's a small mountain. I mean, it's very, very small. It's not much more than a foot high. It can't be much bigger than that. Otherwise, it would never fit in a two-wheeled chariot. You know, it can't be very heavy. We're talking a maximum of 50 to 100 kilos, 100 to 200 pounds. Otherwise, it wouldn't go very easily in a two-wheeled chariot. So it's fairly small, sacred stone, a sunstone, a phoenix, because you can see it's linked to the phoenix. It's a part of the sun that broke off and came to earth in a great fiery ball. So it's a meteorite, and it was sacred to Elagabalus. Now, Elagabalus is interesting because he is the new Jesus. I don't suppose your viewers knew there was a second Jesus. The This is a reincarnation of Jesus, because he is a priest, a galley priest, who venerated Kibel. He is a castrated eunuch galley priest who became emperor of Rome.
You know what, man? I love the Lord, but I'm starting to have more and more problems with Christianity. All this knife business, that ain't cool.
But it's likely that he went further, because they say he actually had a penectomy as well. So he had the full Monty was cut off in order for him to become what the Nazarene believed in, which is the primeval Adam. And the primeval Adam was androgynous, had no organs at all. And this is what he tried to do. And we think he did do.
Okay.
So he was another of these galley priests, just like Percival Galley had, just like Jesus was asking for his disciples to castrate themselves. He did this to himself. And this is why he was so greatly disliked in Rome, because this was actually illegal in Rome. You were not supposed to do this. And so he only lasted about 4 or 5 years, and he was kicked out. And so he was kicked out of Rome. Some say he was killed and thrown into the sewers.
I mean, wasn't this a practice of the zealots?
Well, yes, quite possibly. Rome didn't like all of these strange Eastern beliefs. And so, he was never going to get on very well in Rome. But it just shows the continuation of these belief systems all the way through the 1st century, all the way up until the 3rd century. Elagabalus is about 225 AD. So we're talking early 3rd century.
Yeah, man.
And he venerated this Elagabal sunstone, this great meteorite. And this meteorite is still around in modern history, as it were, in modern stories in the modern world, because I was sitting there in a cinema watching James Bond. I forget which film it was now. Anyway, it was the story of James Bond, where they're running around North Africa, and they go to this meteor crater in North Africa, and the baddie there, his lair that he had made was in this center of this crater, and James Bond gets captured, and him and his sidekick are taken into this big crater. And in the center of this, they've built an observatory, and the baddie character takes them into this observatory, and he shows them the Elagabal stone.
Yeah.
So this is the Elagabal stone in a James Bond film. And it had no business being there. There was no good reason for this stone. It was not really a part of the story. So what on earth were they doing, squeezing the Elagabal stone into a James Bond film? I've got no idea, really, apart from keeping the history
some type of
this
predictive
stone.
programming. I mean, this narrative is old. I mean, they even have it embedded in Islam, in the Kaaba.
Yes, they've got a piece of this stone. So when they go around kissing that stone, that's in the one corner of the Kaaba, it's 6 little pieces, supposedly, of this meteorite, which they are still venerating in Islam. But of course, when they're doing that, I've got a picture here of it somewhere, so I'll stop sharing there. They're doing the same thing. So I'm just going to do a quick search for Mecca, because this is pertinent to what we're talking about. So we're looking for Mecca. Name contains Mecca. No.
So, as soon as it appears in the studio, I'll put it on screen.
Yes. So iMac Mecca.
Damn, somebody even knew which was that. The name of that James Bond movie was that Quantum of Solace.
That sounds about right. Yes, that sounds about
I'm
right.
so far behind on James Bond. My life has been more than exciting enough. I don't really need to
Yes,
watch it on
without having
TV.
that.
Let's see.
For some reason, I can't find it, and I don't know why. It's probably because I'm on this new computer that I bought, and maybe it's not been
Right. Somebody had
um,
mentioned the words of Jesus sounded like Helios, Helios. And I remember, I don't know how true this is. I just have a good memory for things that interest me. And I was reading a book probably about 15 years ago where somebody was trying to translate the Eloi, Eloi, sabachthani, whatever
yes, yes.
when he's on the cross. And there was Aramaic, there were scholars in Hebrew, Aramaic, Old Babylonian. They were all agreeing that we're not quite sure what this is because it doesn't really conform to any of the old languages. Well, Mesoamerican scholars added to the deal and said, well, shoot, that's phonetically, that's how you would probably spell this old Quiche dialect, this old Mayan. So they said, well, what did it mean? It says, well, if we were to phonetically say this, I don't know, it wouldn't be spelled this way in Mayan, but this is exactly what it would have sounded like. And it was Eloi, Eloi, sabachthani, which when ancient Mayan would have been, oh son, why have you abandoned me? And right there in the text, that's when the sun darkens, when Jesus is on the cross. So the researcher I was reading was like how is it that nobody in this hemisphere knew what this was that Jesus said on the cross, but in ancient America it wouldn't have been a mystery, and yet
Yeah.
yet in the hemisphere where it happened, the sun actually darkened right when he said that in the text. So I thought that was pretty profound, but I never forgot that. But I'm mentioning it because somebody in there was asking if that was Helios, Helios. Well, according to the ancient Maya, that's what he said. Oh son, oh son.
Yeah, I can't find the image I was looking for. I don't know why, but if anyone wants to look up, just search for an image of looking at Mecca from above.
Oh,
And
I could have done that. You said aerial of Mecca.
yeah, aerial photo of Mecca.
I hope we're not pissing
when
off any. Hope we're not
when they
pissing
are
off any.
doing their circling ritual.
So I don't know how much you've delved into this, but from my own research, Ralph, Mecca is an imposter in Islam. It was Abbasid Babylonian dynasty changed it from an older site, but an earlier holy site, which would have been Petra, which would have anciently called Becca, but that was under the Umayyads, and then when the Abbasids took over out of Iraq, they changed it from the older site of Petra to a Mecca, and
Yes.
a lot of people who a lot of Islamic people who adhere to the Islamic religion don't even know this major demographic shift in their own religion, where they bow to and pray 5 or 6 times a day was changed. So you want an aerial view of Mecca. See what we got here. Got it. Daytime or nighttime?
Daytime is normally best because you want to see the people circling around in it.
All right, I got it. Let me share my screen. My dogs sound like they're trying to chew somebody apart. You hear them? Going off, man.
She's on patrol today.
Okay. So
any images of the people going round and round? So
man, I'm gonna have to blow this up like this. There's a whole bunch of people there.
No, sometimes you can see the whole thing full of people.
Yeah,
and they're all going round and round.
This looks like it's in wintertime. That's all snow.
Yeah,
Let me
it
find a
could
better
well
picture.
be, yes.
Let me find a better picture. That's unusual. I need to blow. Say it's really hard. Oh, here's a good one. It's going to have to be at nighttime, Ralph, to get the best pictures.
Right. Yeah, can't really see it there, but because they've built up 2 layers on top, of course, so it's no
Yeah.
longer the same as it used to be. But what they do in Mecca is they all circle around the Kaaba. So you get thousands of people all circling around the Kaaba. And when you see it from above, it is the stars in the northern heavens circling around the celestial pole.
Mm-hmm.
That's another temple. That's not the Kaaba.
They have changed it. You're right. They added another levels.
They've added 2 levels to it. Yes, it's much bigger than it used to be.
Didn't even know that. I've seen old pictures of it, but they don't really like people going flying around taking pictures of the inside of that. I don't know why I keep getting all these Alami photos. Why can't you get an old photo of it? How bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Try specifying the search.
Yeah. It's big. So did you see the opening ceremony to the 2012 Olympics in London?
Yeah, that was fairly disgusting. I mean, they were obviously doing that to
Yes, they were showing a Kaaba that was digitized that turned into a bunch of screens.
Oh, I didn't see that bit. Yes.
It might have been okay. It might have been the closing ceremony. It's one of them. It's either the opening ceremony, which is like 3 hours, and the closing ceremony, which is like 3 hours. But they showed the Kaaba, and then they turned around and the Kaaba turned into a bunch of screens showing all kinds of events around the world.
Oh, I've got an image here.
Yeah, I'm not having any luck.
Let me put this on a screen share, and I can show you what I mean. So if I screen share this window, that one. Okay, so this is the only one I could find. This comes from my X channel. And oh yeah, this has got the alternative Mecca as well. So this is what I was talking about, where they go round and round the Kaaba. And of course, what the people are doing here, it's a circling temple, and they circle around the Kaaba as the stars circle around the celestial pole. And that's the symbolism of what they're doing. This because these are Sabaean temples. The Sabaeans are star worshippers.
The Sabaeans were the stargazers. Yeah.
And so they're
Absolutely.
recreating as above, so below. They're recreating the heavens above on the ground below. So they are, Muslims are the stars going around the celestial pole, but don't tell them that because they'll get most upset. Now, I think you're sort of right, but I think I've got a different location. I think that the original Mecca was this one. Now,
Okay.
this is called Mecca. This is the Temple of Mecca in Yemen.
Oh, okay.
This is at Marib. You know Marib, with the famous Marib Dam. So this comes from 6th century BC, when I say that Jewish refugees from the Babylonian exile came down into this land, and they formed the city of Marib.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I can go on. Where's the next one? Here's the Marib Dam. This is the dam they built to dam the Wadi at Marib. I mean, this is huge. This is 6th century BC, this dam was started. This is just one of the sluice gates. So there were 2 of these, one either side of the dam. And the temple they built at Marib is this one, which is the Temple of Mecca. And of course, Mecca is called Mecca actually in Arabia. But this is a circling temple, the same as the Temple of Mecca is now in Arabia. but this dates from 6th century BC, and it's called the Temple of Mecca. And the Mecca they're talking about is the Queen of Sheba, because in Arabia, the Queen of Sheba was called Bilqis, and in Judaic terms, she was called Mecca Tamar. So this is the Temple of Mecca.
So this would be evidence that around 3000 BC, we had a totally different climate in this area.
Well, it could have been arid still, because they depended on the dam.
Okay.
All of their agriculture came from the dam. And
Okay.
it was
I'm
when
just
the
going
dam-
by my memory of the gifts that the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. They were all of like a tropical nature.
Oh yes, but Mecca Tamar came from Upper Egypt. She was Egyptian.
Okay.
So she was Egyptian in my work, Solomon, Pharaoh of Egypt,
Got you.
because she was 10th century, of course. She came from, and we have this from the Kebra Nagast tells us, the
Right.
Ethiopian Bible.
Right.
She came from southern Egypt and went up to see King Solomon. This is all 10th century BC. Now, that's the history of the Queen of Sheba. But she became deified as an incarnation of Isis. And so people were venerating her 400 years later. And so they were worshipping these people who went down. If you read the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament, they were worshipping the Queen of Heaven. So these were Jews in exile being kicked out of Jerusalem, and they are venerating the Queen of Heaven. The Queen of Heaven is Isis.
Got you.
And the Queen of Sheba means star, of course, in Egyptian. So she was the queen of the stars. She was the Queen of Heaven. And so they were worshipping the Queen of Sheba as an incarnation of Isis. And so this temple was really, I suppose you could say, was named not after the Queen of Sheba, but named after Isis, the goddess Isis.
Okay.
And
so it doesn't change the fact that it just changed where the original location of the holy place of Islam was.
yes,
Because I'm very familiar with the changeover from the Umayyad to the Abbasid dynasty. It was the Abbasids that changed the location. The Umayyads had it somewhere else. I've just always believed it was Petra. But
a lot of people do say it's Petra, but the thing is, Petra doesn't appear in the Quran, whereas Marib does appear in the Quran.
Okay.
So for people who are unfamiliar with this location, Petra would be up here in Jordan.
Right.
And there was this trade route that went all the way down the Red Sea. This is modern Mecca here. And this is Saba, named after the Queen of Sheba, of course. This is Saba and Marib down here in modern Yemen. Now,
so up here to the north over by Duba, somewhere in this region, we had Ezion Gibar, which was King Solomon's great southern port into the Red Sea that did all the business around the Gulf of Aden.
Yes, I think that was on the top of the Red Sea here.
That's the one that did all the activity with the Queen of Sheba during that period. I did a video on Ezion Gibar. It means backbone of a giant, but it was at one time it was a huge shipping district.
Yes, but the thing is with Saba is that the Marib Dam broke in 600, 550, whenever it was AD. And so they lost their agriculture. And so these people were going into exile up towards the Arabias, just as Muhammad was there. So they do appear in the Quran. Muhammad says that he met the Sabaeans coming out of Saba, and he befriended them and gave them assistance. But then they continued to give mischief in the land or something, and so he killed them all. So these people were there at the very foundation of Islam, coming out of Marib with their traditions of the circling temple in Marib, which was called Mecca. And I think it was all adopted by Muhammad.
Well, you said earthquake. you said earthquake, and this is right. And that's really interesting to me because the one tuckus right here from New Zealand in the chat anticipated me. It was already on my mind, but you said earthquake. In the beginning of the Dark Ages, there was earthquakes for a 60-year period all over the world in different locations during the Dark Age period. So I find that really interesting that you said it was a dark age that ended their ability to sustain the land with water. It broke their dam.
Well, yes, I think this area was always quite arid. I mean, it's an extension of the Sahara Desert, basically.
Right.
So they depended on this dam. So here is the Temple of Mecca again, the one in Yemen. This is just as Muhammad describes it. So he says that the Sabaeans had a garden on the left and a garden on the right. And you can see that in this image.
I see the ancient riverbed. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the ancient river. This is the dam over here on the left, the old dam.
Right.
And it watered all of these lands. And it's just as it says in the Quran that the Sabaeans, they were known as the Sabaeans, had a garden on the left and a garden on the right. But then God destroyed it and replaced their gardens with nettles. Such a lovely God. So this is the dam on the left, you can see circled in red. And on the right is the Temple of Mecca, which is down here in Marib. And this is the city of Marib. I mean, this was one of the first city of skyscrapers. This is what it looked like.
Yeah, I've seen this city depicted in art in different deals, and it kind of frustrating because it's some of these guys that promote the Tartarian narrative, and I totally disagree. But yeah, that's the first skyscraper deal. I think the tallest one was eight stories or something.
Yeah, mostly made of mud brick as well. So
right,
it's quite amazing. And again, this is modern Mecca where they're circling the celestial pole. But don't tell them that Islam is all about star worshippers.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got if you have a tradition that's before the foundations of the very religion you're adhering to now, that a rock fell out of the sky and you're claiming the rock may have come from the pole star, then the actual ritual would be people serving as circumpolar stars going around the meteorite.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where it all comes from. But they've lost the history and they're denying the history. So of course they've manipulated this ancient history.
Well, look, I tell you what, I'm gonna make an agreement with you. Let's just keep it to ourselves because they're not trying to hear it, bro. Just not trying to hear it, man.
Yeah, I wish they would go back to the original religion, because the original religion was all Sabaean. It was all star worshipping. That's the wrong term in a way. They were astronomers. They were looking at the heavens to see the movements of the heavens. The Mandeans down in Iraq, they described John the Baptist as an original Sabaean, a star worshipper.
Okay.
So, because they venerate John the Baptist. And they said that John the Baptist used to work 7 nights a week because he's an astronomer. He comes out at night. He only works during the night.
Right.
And then he complained that he could not service his wife. And so they agreed that he could observe the heavens 4 nights a week, and then he could spend another 3 nights with his wife. So, yeah, very much they are describing John the Baptist as
how interesting that John the Baptist had a wife, that he didn't actually go up under the knife.
Well, a lot of these people would have been castrated in later life if that's what they were doing.
Okay.
So you could have a family, and then when you want to join the priesthood or become the high priest, then you get castrated.
Okay.
So yes, if Jesus himself was castrated, which I think he probably was, he would have had a family first, and then he would have been castrated in later life.
I got you. I got you.
And that's how you can have your
which Jesus being a lot older than the traditional 33 years old is what the Judeo-Christian model.
He would have been older than that. Yes.
So we do have historical verification for that idea, and that's They don't like it, but Irenaeus did let it slip
Yes,
that
Irenaeus
Jesus
does.
was over 50 years old, and he got mad at other people for saying he wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. But we have indications of this ceremony from 4 different locations. So we have the story from Arthurian legend that says that they were trying to cure the wounded king, etc. We have the story from the doctrine of Addai, which is the story of Edessa, where Jesus is sending letters up to the king of Edessa in order to cure him because he had an ailment. Then we have the story by Josephus Flavius that apostles, Christian apostles from Judea were going up to the monarchy of the Adiabeni royals, in order to convert them to Judaism and get them circumcised. And there was this big debate as to whether they should be circumcised or not. And of course, Adiabeni is Edessa, because the queen of Adiabeni was the queen of Edessa. She was married to King Abgarus of Edessa. So when it's talking about apostles going up and converting this royal family, it's talking about Edessa. So the conversion of the Edessans to Judaism, and were they going to be circumcised? Because the Talmud again says that Queen Helena of Edessa converted to Judaism. She became a Nazarene Jew. And then we have the Council of Jerusalem. So we've got 4 of these different books. We're all giving the same story. The Council of Jerusalem in Acts of the Apostles is about Saul Paul, going up and down to Antioch to convert the people of Antioch to Judaism, and this big debate as to whether they should be circumcised or not. It's the same debate that Josephus Flavius is talking about.
Right.
But Josephus Flavius is talking about Adiabeni, which we know is Edessa. Acts of the Apostles is talking about going up to Antioch. But Edessa's name, its true name, was Antioch Edessa.
Okay.
So it may well be that in Acts of the Apostles, this story of the disciples going backwards and forwards to Antioch is actually talking about them going to Edessa and trying to convert them to Judaism.
It also brings to the table there's a whole nother historical tethering here, because there's a lot of apologists and there's a lot of Christian authors who cite that Christianity was first named so at Antioch.
Yes.
So if the Edessa has been severed off of these original accounts, then it would literally be saying that Christianity was first birthed at Edessa.
Well, and traditionally it was, of course, because people didn't go to Antioch so much. They went to Edessa. When there's a pilgrim called Lady Egeria, 4th century. So this is quite early. And she does a pilgrimage.
She's the one that goes to Goshen in northern Egypt too?
Yeah.
In her
and
travelogue?
she goes to Edessa. So she's a solo traveler. You couldn't do it nowadays. But anyway, she's a solo traveler. She probably had some guides and whatever. But probably. 4th century, she comes from Gaul, I think she came from originally. And she travels all the way to Edessa because Edessa was known as the birth of Christianity, was at Edessa. And it's interesting because she gives real historical details. So she says it is 26 days with 26 stations between Jerusalem and Edessa. So they obviously have a night stop, every night they stop. And there is 26 days to get from Jerusalem to Edessa, up in Mesopotamia. So it's a nice travelogue. And she went to Edessa to see the tombs of the Edessan kings, because it was connected with Christianity.
Man, do you know, is this the same lady who wrote a famous account of traveling from like the area of Turkey, and she went all the way to northern Egypt in the land of Goshen area because she wanted to go visit the area where the Israelites were reported to be.
It
There's a
sounds
famous,
like, yeah, it
it's a
sounds like the
famous,
same
yeah, it's a
lady.
famous travelogue.
Yeah, it sounds like the same travelogue because she did a lot of these. Well, pilgrims did in those days. They actually went on these huge journeys, which took years, maybe to complete.
So I have something to share with you. It's very compelling, but I've done a lot of research from the 19th century because these guys, they're on another level. And like Charles Waite produced his material on the Gospel of Marcion, and one of the things he noted was that the researchers of the 1700s, the 18th century, and the 19th century, they noted that there are no historical records, there's no travel logs, there's nothing at all until after the 700s AD that shows that any of the Christian story at all even happened in Jerusalem. And this is one thing that they're arguing about. Scholars are arguing about this in the 1800s. And I have done videos showing my community in my Dark Scriptures playlist that, look, this was a thing. These historians in the 1700s and 1800s were perplexed as to why, if all these amazing things happened in the gospel and Christian narrative in Jerusalem, they weren't denying they happened. They denied they happened in Jerusalem. And
Yeah.
they said, man, none of these places existed. There was no travelogues. No one was going to Jerusalem to go see all these amazing places until the story had spread after the 700s that these things happened in Jerusalem.
Yeah, Alfred the Great did the same. So the king that founded England as we know it today is Alfred the Great, and he had this great battle with the Vikings coming across and whatever. But while he was doing this, he took time out to send the Bishop of Salisbury to go to Edessa and to go to India and to the Nazarene Church in Malabar in India to give tribute to them, because it was founded by St. Thomas, who is the brother of Jesus. So this journey, this pilgrimage with tribute from the King of England didn't go to Jerusalem. It went to Edessa and to Malabar in India. It went all the way to India, apparently, to give tribute to the Christian church there. Well, it would have been a Nazarene church, not a Christian church as such. But so the importance of Edessa and so on was known in that era, although it's not known today.
It's amazing.
Because, the bones, Judas Thomas, who was the brother of Jesus, his name is Judas Thomas Didymus,
The twin.
Thaddeus. He went to found the church in Malabar. Now
This is Nestorian Christianity, right?
Sort of, yeah. It's Nazarene, Church of Jesus and James. But he came from Edessa, and we know this because it's recorded that in the 3rd century, the Church of Malabar in India was losing people. They needed more people. So what they did is they sent the bones of Judas Thomas back to Edessa, because that's where he came from, in return for 350 people migrating to southern India to populate the Church of Judas Thomas in India. So it was known at this very early era and known to Alfred the Great that Judas Thomas came from Edessa. Now, Judas Thomas is the brother of Jesus. So where's Jesus going to come from? All of these histories tie into Edessa. St. Andrew came from Edessa. Eusebius went to university, as it was, in Edessa. Loads of these important people that we know from this era all surround the city of Edessa. But we seem
it's so compelling that there are so many books written in the last 200 years trying to fill in the 18 missing years of Jesus, from 12 at the temple till 30 when he begins his ministry. And it seems like they all fit India in there somehow. India and the Parthian region is where they claim Jesus spent most of that missing time.
Well, yes, but I think it was his brother, because his brother was supposed to be his twin brother. That's why he was
Right.
called.
Yeah, Didymus is twin. I get it.
Yeah, Thomas Didymus means twin. And if you read the Acts of Thomas, it's quite clear that Thomas looked exactly like Jesus because everyone mistook him for Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And so I think when they're talking about Jesus going to India, I have the hunch that it was actually his brother that went there and not Jesus himself. Jesus would have been the king of Edessa, and he was trying to take over Judea in order to consolidate the power of the Edessan monarchy in the whole of the Levant.
So he would have been opposed by the Hasmonean dynasty. He would have been
yes.
the Herodian kings.
Well, this was the trouble he was having. He was having great trouble in unifying that region around the Edessan church, around the Edessan monarchy. His mother had tried. His mother, in my books, was Queen Helena, and she became the queen of the Jews in the AD 50s. So Queen Helena went down to Jerusalem. She saved Jerusalem from famine in, call it AD 50, something of that nature. And then she built the largest palace and the largest tomb in Jerusalem. So, and she was the queen of Edessa. So de facto, she became the queen of the Jews in the AD 50s. And she donated the solid gold menorah to the temple. So that huge, great menorah, which you see on the Arch of Titus in Rome.
Arch of Titus shows it clearly, yes.
Yeah, that was given to the temple by Queen Helena of Edessa. So you can see how closely these Edessan monarchies were linked to Judea and to Jerusalem, with her becoming the queen of the Jews.
Right.
Now, her son, therefore, would have adopted that title and become the king of the Jews. And that's exactly what I think happened. So this was their great scheme, is if they could consolidate the Roman East around the Edessan monarchy, they would become a very, very powerful faction. Yes, that's the one, the Arch of Titus.
Yes, this is the Arch of Titus, showing the Romans sacking the Jerusalem temple.
Yeah. So this was donated to the temple by Queen Helena of Edessa. This is how important she was. And it was supposed to be solid gold. And this was taken to Rome, obviously, after the sacking of Jerusalem. And this paid for the Colosseum. So when you go to Rome and see the Colosseum, it was paid for by the wealth that came out of Jerusalem when Jerusalem was sacked.
So I just want to add one detail. I don't know if you'll agree or not, but I went on a binge one time studying Cicero. I read his book on government, which is huge, and it led me to, I fell in love with Cicero. His book on oratory is something that I had studied. It's a fascinating, it's a huge book, but it's a fascinating lesson on public speaking, and it's 2,000 years old. And Cicero had spent time defending some of his friends, and it literally says it in the writings of Cicero that his friends wanted to keep this hush hush. He says, because the Jews have agents everywhere, and they've gotten us into a really fine mess, and it had to do with money laundering. And the research on Cicero's time was that the whole idea about the Jewish war against Rome, there was a lot more going on sociopolitically at the time, and it had to do with wealth of Rome disappearing into Judea. And they were trying to figure out what was going on. So when you say now that this massive amount of gold and ritual and temple objects actually funded the construction of the Colosseum, to me, I hear payback. I hear the Romans getting payback for all this, because they couldn't figure out how they were losing the wealth, but they knew it was going to Judea. And this one researcher I had really been in reading, he had even linked Nero and the story of Pompeii and all that. All this was linked together by him, that saying that Nero found out she was pregnant, and that her being Jewish when all this controversy was going on was a real problem for him. And this is what began his downfall.
Well, certainly Rome was bankrupt when this happened. They had had the year of 4 emperors. Nero had spent, money left, right, and center. So Rome was pretty much bankrupt. Then they had the year of 4 emperors, so they had battles for a whole year. Then Vespasian came to the throne, and the coffers were indeed empty. Rome was bankrupt. And so in part, yes, Vespasian needed a victory in Judea because he needed the wealth of Judea. He needed the wealth of Jerusalem.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. The Romans got their asses kicked at first. It wasn't easy. What did they do? They had to bring in the 10th Legion, didn't they?
Yeah, it was a 4-year battle, this one. It went on for 4 years. It was not an easy revolt. Yes, the position of Vespasian was by no means guaranteed. He only sailed to Rome at the last minute when he thought he could actually take over Rome, because he didn't have an oracle on his side. He was not royal. He had no business. He was not related to Caesar, of course. So he had no business being the emperor. So it was very difficult for an army commander like him, a commoner, to become the emperor of Rome. But he was a very successful emperor. He was one of the better emperors of Rome. He was put Rome back.
I believe his son was Titus.
Yeah, his son was Titus. He was okay, but the next one, Domitian, was a bit of a tyrant, and the Flavian emperors dissolved at that point. He was not a very good emperor.
Wow, man. You caught me flat-footed, because when we talked before the show, for some reason I had it in my mind that you and I were going to be discussing Akhenaten and the Exodus period and the 377 Amarna tablets, and just that general period of Old Testament history. So this kind of caught me flat-footed, this whole video here. But this has been a fantastic talk, man. I love having you on the channel, man. I hope you come back soon. But I'm gonna have to wrap this up, because this is almost we're going toward 3 hours now.
Yes, that's right. Well, we can do that next time. Actually, I've got, as you know, I've got 4 or 5 books on the Old Testament, so we can go through all of that Akhenaten story in another talk.
I'd love to compare notes on that. I've done a bunch of notes on that too.
That is an interesting story. It really is. And it links again with Judaism and Christianity, because that's where a lot of Judaism and Christianity came from. It came from Akhenaten being the first of the monotheists. So it's intimately linked with what we've been talking about.
Well, I'm gonna tell you the greatest takeaway here is that given 2 alternatives, one of them going under the knife and one of them being up under female authority, I think I'm going to choose female authority every time. I don't think I'm going to be a high priest anytime soon.
I don't know where they got this idea from. Sometimes it's all a bit crazy, but they were doing crazy things in those days. You know what?
Praise the goddess. That's all I got to say. Yeah, man. Yeah, Ralph, I love talking to you, man. It's great. You got great spirit. It's I would definitely like to schedule in pretty quick. There's a couple other people I want to do like monthlies with, and you're one of them. But I would definitely like to. We have a lot to discuss. I mean, we're literally only talking about a 2 or 3 year time period here. I mean, you can imagine how many conversations we can have in other periods of history.
Yeah, it's always great to be on the show. So yes, love to come back at another time.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get it scheduled the next couple of days. I'll have Big John contact you, man, so we can schedule you right back in, because these are my type of discussions. I love the back and forth in dialogue, back and forth in perspectives, back and forth in history. That's my thing, man. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
So you got all your links are already in the description box. Also my moderators are really good at putting guest links in. So if you got any final words, this is the perfect time for it. To give you the floor.
No, it's just, this is part and parcel of what I've been doing. So we're delving into the past and rediscovering history that we didn't know. I've just done a talk actually with another chap about Shakespeare, because we don't even know who Shakespeare was. So here's another character who's gone missing from history, and we have to try and re-find them. And this is what we see so often: Old Testament, New Testament, Arthurian legend, Shakespeare. A lot of these histories are not quite as we've been taught.
Right.
And there's an awful lot of history that points towards a slightly different interpretation. And I urge people to go out there and have a look, because
we can talk about that, because that's Shakespeare's another one. It'd be a great conversation, but I just have to throw a cliffhanger out there. I just don't answer me. Is it possible the Queen had a baby out of wedlock and it was with a two-door?
Yes, that's part of the story. Yes.
Man, we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about that too. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
We're going to go ahead and go right now, because Whit and I have been drinking coffee and other things all morning long, and I got to go to the bathroom again. And this is unheard of. My community knows I do 5-hour videos and never have to use the bathroom, and I'm drinking coffee the whole time. But today I've been drinking too much, and I got to go again. I know what it is. We got to talking about that knife, and my bladder keeps wanting to remind me, man, that we need you.
Brilliant.
It's been great, man. I'll holler at you later.
Okay, good to see you.
Yeah, I got much love for that man. It's great talking to him. But I do need to go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna see Whit off. Come on in here, Whit. Whit's leaving today. He's been with me for what, 20 days?
19 days. Wham for the win. Rogue 19.
Yeah, he's helped me do things on my property. He's helped get all in my business.
Thanks, Cheryl, for the shirts. I got Santa Claus bag of prizes coming back to the homies in Florida. Don't worry.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. It's been
Check
fun.
out the merch.
He's been hanging out in my library when I'm getting work done.
Yeah. Whew.
So I'll be bringing. I still got to get to my emails. I'm behind in emails because I've got 3 different large projects all unfolding. You guys know I just finished one of them. One large project was, I promised you guys that I was going to take all my original data dumps that nobody watches anymore because they're 5 and 6 years old, and I was going to repackage them by taking all the extraneous material off the front and off the end and just giving you the core information. And you've already seen one a day uploading. This is my new series, Archaix Intel Drops. It's a whole playlist by itself, but there's 54 of them already uploaded to YouTube. I don't have to do anything. And you see every day one's dropping. But on the 13th, we begin the Archaix 13 Days Before Christmas. 2 videos a day drop. One in the morning, one in the afternoon. To catch everybody up. People are always complaining, man, where do I start? I need to catch up. This is where you need to catch up with, because there's 300 of these Intel drops. And the first 54 are in December. We're just trying to catch the community, whoever wants to catch up, so you don't have to log into a video and then have to deal with all me chatting at the beginning and me chatting at the end. This is just core videos. And even the intros have been abbreviated to 6 seconds so you can get straight into it. Now, starting on the 13th, you got 2 videos a day. And then on Christmas, you've got 4 Archaix Intel drops, and you're not going to have time to watch them, because on Christmas Day, anybody who doesn't have plans, going out, traveling, doing whatever, you can spend Christmas with me, because I'm going to be doing an 8-hour live video. I'm going to spend Christmas with you guys all day long. And we're just going to bring people on the screen. We're going to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. We can do Q&A. You can tell us your research. It doesn't matter. If you want to spend Christmas with the Archaix family, then you can. We're 8 hours. We're going to be broadcasting live on Christmas Day. And anybody who wants to come up on the screen, you can come on. You want to talk a little shit and make me delete you, that's okay too. Whatever you want to do on Christmas. So, and then after Christmas, it's 2 videos a day until we get the full 54 videos. I still got more lives. I do have, I got to catch up on my emails. Somebody I need to catch up with, because we're gonna be doing some videos together too on some stuff like Ralph Ellis and I doing some deep dives. I've got a few guests. I got a few guests in mind. One of them you already know, John Lamb Lash. He and I are gonna do some projects together. But yeah, the future looks bright. But I got other big projects too, and one of them is my other YouTube channel. You guys know I got like 6,000 subs in there, but my other YouTube channel is being prepared right now. It used to be the Phalorn Saga, but I went ahead and edited my field, and I got all that fiction that I wrote for years and years. I went ahead and just gave it to source, because Archaix is more important. And that channel is about to become something else. And I'm about to start uploading a bunch of short, powerful videos that don't really have a lot to do with Archaix. I'm correcting information that's in the field. I'm literally correcting misinformation. That's what that channel is about. That's another huge project. The other project that I'm far into right now, and I will be done before the end of December, is I'm finishing Archaix Academy. I finally have the time. So other than that, guys, that's it. My bladder is telling me that I need to take care of it. But I like that intro, so I'm going to do it again. Or should have, now, you know what? I'm going to go back to Sherlock Holmes. How about that one? I got so many intros and outros, I'm just playing with them. Anyway, I love you guys.